right, and we are live.
Hi, everybody. This is community meeting / town hall to talk about the healing revamp. We also have a text channel, healing revamp discussion 3. So if you, for example, if you don't have a microphone, feel free to post stuff in there. My name is Enk. I'm the lead content developer, as many of you know. And we were asked to introduce the other devs here so people can figure out who's talking. So going down the line, Hober, do you want to just introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. I'm Hober Mallow. I'm one of the senior content devs. You all probably know who I am.
I don't know if all the devs have mics at the moment. I know Jekt is here as well. Jekt is a content developer for the game and has been really helpful in responding to player feedback on the healing revamp. Kalando? Kalando is here as well. He is the community manager for the dev team, and you all probably have interacted with him a fair bit in Discord. Do you want to just say you're here as well, Jeff? I see you're in the chat.
I'm here. I do the accounting. I count the pennies rolling in.
Jeff is also the game owner, as you all know.
We get whole pennies.
And obviously, Jeff has had a big role in the design process behind the healing revamp and has done almost all of the code work as well. Right on. I'm looking through here. I'm not seeing any other devs present, but if one shows up, we will let you know. So the reason I called this meeting is, well, I was on vacation last week, enjoying the nice weather up in Maine in the northern United States. And I got home and it seemed like there was just a big drama. So it took me a couple of days to inform myself about exactly what went down, why it was that we had a lot of players who were upset, and just start making a plan as to how to improve things. So my understanding is that we opened up a testing event, the second testing event for the healing revamp, but it was too early. And what you saw in there was a big mess. It wasn't what we had wanted, which was for the second testing event to be a more polished and improved version of the first testing event. There were a lot of things on there that were not ready for prime time. So I don't want to get into a whole business about exactly why this happened, why that timing was selected. Obviously, it was a little challenging because I wasn't present when it went live. I was not, I was like probably climbing a mountain at the time. But it happened. I'm sorry. That's not what I wanted to happen. So we put you all through something we should not have put you through. I don't want you to log on a testing event thinking you're going to see the effect that we did on transference mastery and then find out that your ship is like half the speed and you can't even undock. That's not what we wanted to do. That was never my plan. So I 100% understand if you went on there and you got upset, or even worse than upset, you panicked or thinking like, are we just trolling you? What are we doing? Who's driving this ship? So I'm now pretty confident to say that I think I understand what the main problems were there. And we already have gone all the way up, talked with Jeff, and agreed on some changes we're going to make. So I do want to make plenty of space for you to give me your feedback, to tell me your feelings on the matter. But before we do that, I do think it's important for me to tell you a few items that we are going to act on already. So if it's something you were going to talk to me about, you don't need to waste your breath, and I'll just let you know what our plan is. So the augmenters. The augmenters were very not okay in the second testing event. And it turns out that there actually was a straight up bug in the process that generates their stats. So we have found that bug. And moreover, we're pretty much just going to roll back what you saw, the changes you saw to augmenters. There are a few changes we do want to make to augmenters still, and I will talk about those now. This would be a good time to mention it. We are going to add new rarity tiers. Right now we have, junk, common, uncommon, rare, exotic. We are going to add 2 more exotic rarity tiers. And Hober, I believe we're actually naming them different things as well?
Yeah. So a lot of you have rightfully pushed for new rarity tiers. You've pointed out that a lot of the implicit tiers that we have in the game should be made explicit and should be very clearly delineated. And we agree with you, right? Like we want to do that. And so what we've done is I've posted a little picture in the discussion channel. We've added two new rarity tiers. We've added Exalted and Legendary. And so these will be used to indicate that something is a bit stronger than exotic and a bit more difficult to acquire. Only specific items will have these tiers, and you can pretty much guarantee that like if something is considered to be like the best thing you can get at a tech level, it will probably be um, exalted, or sorry, it will probably be legendary. And they've got cool little colors
Nice.
on them too. I worked
Real
really
quick,
hard to get the
which one
colors.
was higher? Which one was higher?
Legendary is higher than exalted.
So the exact color is up for discussion. I would say, I mean, if you feel like, for me, with my eyes, that pink is like a little close to orange, but the general concept is we want to be real with the fact that, for example, Tech 22 has been around long enough as the top tech that we have gone and produced many effective tiers of the end game. And just having them all ending up in exotic is making it hard for us to balance them properly. So we basically had two choices. Either we could keep creating better and better T22 stuff in the exotic category, basically making them overpowered according to the balance formulas. But if we did that, then it's really hard to tell whether something is appropriately balanced, or we could create new rarity tiers. Just for your information, on the back end, we're also going to create stricter rules about which rarity tiers are allowed to be used on new items. We do not want devs just going in and creating a bunch of legendary items right off the bat. And every new item they make is legendary. That would just kind of flood the market, and then exotic becomes pointless and legendary is the new exotic. So we're going to create some pretty strict rules when it comes to how developers can create items to make sure that legendary items really are rare and like exciting to obtain. But to give an example, Olympus Plus ships would be in that highest tier in the T22 category. Excuse me, in the T21 category, since they are really that kind of pinnacle T21 hull, and you can only obtain them rarely from some of the top T21 bosses. So I got onto this rarity tier business because I was talking about the augmenter sheet and how we're going to revert the bulk of it to what you were seeing in the first testing event. The big change we still want to make with some augmenters is there are some that are just frankly not coded correctly in terms of their rarity. And the Grand Navigator's augmenters are an example of that. They never should have been exotic. They just aren't obtained in a way that would be appropriate to have that rarity tier on them. They probably should be uncommon. At any rate, they should not be exotic. And the fact that they are currently exotic in the sheet makes them so powerful that you all are finding, hey, these are really good to use on the test server. And we don't want you to be using an aug that's easy to get instead of an aug that's hard to get that you have spent blood, sweat, and tears obtaining on live. If this augmenter is better than, let's say, an aug that only comes from Banneking, then that's kind of disrespectful to the player's time, in my opinion. So while it is a nerf to certain augs, specifically an aug like that one that should never have been exotic, what we're really saying is we respect your time that you've spent to obtain the truly rare items, and those items should be comparatively better. So that's the main change that we want to make to augmenters. We want to more or less revert things to what you were familiar with, but now that we do have these new rarity tiers, we would like to adjust the rarity tiers on some outliers that are marked as too rare versus how they're actually obtained. Once we've done that and we've applied the new rarity tiers where appropriate, it may be that certain extremely good augs are still above where they're supposed to be balance-wise. And in that scenario, we do want to reserve the right to nerf those augs, but I believe the new rarity tiers are going to make it easier for us to keep them conclusively better than all of the competition, to reflect the fact that they are the most expensive and rarest items to obtain. So that's the main thing I wanted to tell you about when it comes to augmenters. Obviously the colors can still are still up for debate. But I'm hoping that you all are pretty excited about this. I am personally very excited to have new rarity tiers, because I think it's going to give us the opportunity to really make certain like fancy rare items shine. And the cool news is that we're also going to have those rarity tiers available for other types of items. So, for example, ships. So once we create that new rarity tier, we can also make ships legendary or exalted. And right now we are experimenting with how we can allow those highest rarity type of ships have a little bit more interest to them, like whether it means an extra perk or some other twists and turns with their stats so that they do feel better. Because we know that in the hull sheet, the way we've created it, hull progression is not that impressive with tech. The main thing you get is a bit more hull space, a bit more speed, and you can use higher tech augmenters. So we do want to come back, we want to move back a little bit to the old days when higher tech ships felt more exciting and they had more interesting or novel aspects to them. But overall, I will say the hull sheet was one of the biggest problems with testing event number 2. It frankly was not ready for prime time. It's more of a proof of concept at this stage, and it never should have seen the light of day the way it did. So that was a huge mess up. And we actually have already, since the weekend, made a lot of improvements. And this is due to Hober's hard work in polishing up the ships in the hull sheet and getting them to look a lot more interesting, especially when it comes to the Exalted and Legendary tier. Let's see here. Oh, another point on ships. People are telling me, I can't even undock, my ship is overhulled, or why is my ship half as fast as it used to be? We actually are super okay with upping the baseline hull space and speed on ships. We don't want to put it through the roof because that will just trivialize them. But if you get on test server and you find that your ship is not able to hold all your gear, don't take that to mean that we're like intentionally messing with you. That's just the fact that we weren't quite sure where to put the baseline, so we put it somewhere to see. And we are amenable to increasing the baselines on both the hull space and the speeds of ships. So that was a lot of information, but I wanted to get it across because I assume if I didn't say those things, these would be the topics that you all would want to tell me about. And I just wanted to make sure you know we're already on it. We've already made a lot of progress in just 2 days, and we're not done yet. So with that said, let me turn it over to you all and hear if you have any other feedback you want to give me.
Can I just confirm that the stats on the test server currently are not what the intention is, this sort of random current progress, and it is being changed?
Do you
Yes.
mean right now or like
Yeah, right now.
on the stats on the test server right now are different than they were when the testing event was open?
Yeah, I can see that. It just seems like there's a lot of random things like Twisted Death Augs not being exotic, for instance. I assume that's just in process of being changed.
I think you don't have the new beta client, so you can't see it.
Fair enough.
Okay, yeah. So Earthkeeper, overall, let me just ask you all, don't even look on the test server right now, because again, you need a new client to see some of this stuff. It is in progress, but the main takeaway is we are acting on. You saw a lot of bad stuff that shouldn't have seen the light of day when we did the testing event 2. And if you have specific questions about like stuff that you saw on there, please ask about it, and I will tell you what the status is. Rend, I think you had something to say.
I actually have several things to say right now. I'm sorry for my AC running. So my concern is always new players. Always has been, always will be. And there are 2 concerns I have right now. The first is the entire front 1,000 levels of the game are right now functionally unplayable because of the shield increases. I just went through trying early game stuff. I know, yeah, you're not supposed to, but I didn't have time over the weekend. And there are virtually no areas where you can play. I went through Colored Empires, Vulcan, Arctica, open field leveling with goldens and monochromes, they're unkillable. You can't kill them because by the time you do enough damage to drop 1 or 2, there's 4 of them on top of you pounding you down, and it just takes too long to kill anything.
Okay, let me tell you something, Rend. 100% I agree. That should not be the way the game is. 100% it's not going to be the way the game is when we release this project. So the funny thing about AI balance is it's one of those things that looms large for a player tester because it's everywhere and it totally affects your gameplay. But on the dev side, it's very easy for us to fix. So the reason we haven't attempted to fiddle with AI balance to get it tuned to the right place is that the gear they're using is in flux. We don't want to, until the gear is relatively stable, it's not going to be a good use of our time to calibrate the AI balance because we're just going to have to keep doing it over and over again. So 100%, that is a problem, what you're describing. But equally, 100%, it's not going to be a problem for us to fix. It's just not the time in the process to fix it yet.
Second issue I'd like to address. With the tier system, can we get the lower mid-tech AUGs, the low and mid-tech AUGs, adjusted correctly to the tiers? The example I gave to Haber is right now, the first tier of combined AUGs, the Rage AUGs, are common tier. Unless I'm misunderstanding how your system works, they should be uncommon tier. And this is actually important because at, say, Tech 11, a single Rage AUG that requires, I think it's like 500 million credits to make, is the same as, it has half the power of a Jungle AUG, which is like 50 million credits off the market. There's
Okay.
no people to ever use those. And hang on, there's one more point in conjunction with this. When I went on test, I was specifically told that the increase to 16, 17, 18, 19 AUGs on the second testing event was to compensate for the removal of the 4 AUG slots from the heavy fighters and support freighters. If the extra stats on that section of AUGs is getting rolled back, is the 4 AUG slots being put back on? Or, hang on, let me rephrase this. There is a very large power jump from 16, 17, 18, and then boom, 20. Will that be smoothed out going forward? Is my correct question. I apologize for misstating my question.
As to the first half of the question, as we go through with the new rarity tiers, we definitely can have a look at those lower tech constructed AUGs and make sure that they have the right rarity. So we'll definitely let you know once we've done that. I imagine it will be before the next testing event, which is to be announced. Let's see here. As to the other question, you're asking about progression from around Tech 16 to Tech 20, is that right?
With the augmenters, there's a very large power jump at Tech 20, and I was told that that was being smoothed out. Is that being smoothed out?
Yes.
Okay, there's your answer. All right.
If I just follow on from the first comment that was made there, I find it difficult when you tell us that AI balance is not going to be adjusted in these first initial testing events. But then when we log on to test server and things like that, the devs typically tell us, well, don't go test in beta NTARs, don't look at your ship stats, go test it on AI, that's what we'll tell. So if we don't have something that's balanced AI to start with to test things on, what's the purpose of us going onto the test server when you hold these events?
I can
What
answer.
do we expect to be testing?
All right, go ahead, Hober.
Yeah. So the thing that we're trying to do is, as we said before, create a new system. And in a lot of ways, the damage that you do to the beta Antares like target dummy is not going to be in the same proportion or similar to what you get on live, right? So you might know how strong you are compared to live, but that won't tell you anything about how effective you are. We are going to adjust AI balance according to player power. So if you are X amount of tankiness and you're X amount of damage, we're going to be taking that into account across the entire player base, and in the aggregate using that to determine how difficult AI need to be. So when you go test against AI and you're like, this thing instantly kills me, and everyone is saying that, whether they're tanky or not, that lets us know, okay, so this is where AI balance is at right now. This is where players are at. Are players between, like, is the relative tankiness and damage output and utility between players where we want it? If yes, then we can adjust AI balance and get it to a point where like the balance of the AI is being addressed and adjusted. Now, the reason why that happened in the previous testing event, right? And you all were like, what in the heck are you getting me to test? Like, why is it like this? Is because, quite frankly, like, there were just bugs. Like, straight up, there were bugs that we didn't even find out about until we, like, spent hours looking through how everything worked. That wasn't the intention. The intention was that we got things to a point where it was stable, and then we could balance the AI. Like, we can't balance the AI in a vacuum. We have to balance the AI against where players are at.
So perhaps I misunderstood Ake's comment earlier. The intention will be for the next testing event for you to have done what you can to balance AI on the dev side. You won't just be releasing it with unbalanced AI and expecting us to try them out like that and then balancing afterwards.
I
Correct.
just
One thing, let me say this. One thing I've definitely learned from especially event 1 and to a certain extent event 2 as well, we need to do some more work on our end before we open it up and ask you to test, because it is a very big project and it needs to be a little more polished before players can feel like they have direction as to what to test. That was actually my intention with event 2. I didn't want it to go up this early, and I had wanted to do some more internal testing before we let you all loose on it. That's not how it went down, but all we can do is move forward at this point. So for sure, I am already working with my lead QA, Newman, also known as Kenga, to figure out a way to get some internal testing to knock off the hard edges a bit before we open things up for testing event 3.
Am I allowed to make a suggestion?
Sure.
Now, I understand Jeff loves his new armor system, and I fully appreciate and would not for a single second argue that the resistance levels at post 20 were completely over the top. However, having high resistance levels at early levels is in my mind a significant problem. But even like my comment about shields was for things like light fighters and support fighters, which don't have any armor. But heavy fighters are right now a nightmare to fight at early levels because the armor value they have for their tech level is absurd. Would it be practical to still have armor scaling to tech, just not at the same rate as it previously did? My mind is so capital ships and heavy fighters get their tech level ×2 in armor. So a tech 6 heavy fighter has 12 armor. And say light fighters and support fighters get their tech level divided by half in armor. So a tech 6 support fighter would have 3 armor.
So wait, hang on a second, Rand. I understand your question, but I want to make sure I understand the background. Are you finding that in the low tech situation, people are just having too much armor?
Massively too much armor.
Okay.
The example I give is blue bullets, blue betas. Previously had no resistance at all and 10,000 shields. Right now on test, they have 50 armor and 20,000 shields.
Okay.
You can't dent them with anything.
Got it. Thanks. I will have a look at that. We are doing some internal conversations on how armor is working. So I'll take a look at that. And I think your point, especially about how it's working out in the low tech levels, is well taken. So we'll pay a special attention to that as we deliberate.
I wanted to just make a comment about how the concept of shield stealing seemed to be working for me on test. I understand a lot of the details of it, like the augs were overpowered and resistances were off and things like this, and won't comment on that. But just as the general concept, it was feeling to me like it was going to be an extremely difficult situation to balance the idea of shield monkeys stealing enough shields for it to be a useful mechanic for them to go heal things, while also not stealing so much shields that they become a DPS class. And if they're becoming a DPS class, because of the regen they get off the shield stealing, they're also a tank class. And they are just now all of a sudden the overall best class in the game. And I just was looking at it and seeing that it's going to be a very difficult job to balance it into a way that the mechanic is useful without being overpowered in another situation. And I'm not sure what the solution to that is.
I think you're right that it's difficult, but I also think before we changed the hulls and augmenters, we had it dialed in pretty well. I think the changes to the augmenters in particular kind of messed that up.
They have no armor. They can only heal themselves when they are losing shield or have lost shield too. So it's not like they're going to be tanky per se. They can still be bursted and take a significant amount of damage.
So let me propose this, and this is actually coming right out of a conversation I had with Jeff. Once we have actioned the items I was discussing for you all, in terms of the changes to basically item stats, especially augmenters, and gotten things back to more like they were after the first testing event, let's have another look. We'll do it internally, but we can have another look at how the shield monkey balance is going. Whether we are dialing it in correctly, like Jeff says, to the point that shield monkey does have this new stealing capability, but it doesn't just become a DPS class, like you said, Earthkeeper. So let's see where things land after the improvements to the items, and if they're not in a good place, then we can look at some potential changes to the class setup to get it to behave a little bit more like what was intended. Goofy has a question and asked to be called on.
Okay, my understanding is the inbuilts are going to be registered, and you have to have the skill for all the inbuilts to use a ship now. That's going to be very, very difficult for some of the ships, like the Operative has a Tech 19 tractor and it is a Tech 19 ship. But how many newer people that's getting a Tech 19 ship is going to have Tech 19 tractoring? And there are several other ships that have inbuilts that are locked on a ship that normally they can't use until they get the skill, but they still can fly the ship. But now they won't be able to fly the ships at all.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially because I don't know if the ship item tooltip even mentions this. Like, let's say you were going to buy it off the market. You might not realize that you can't use the ship. That's a good example, especially with tractoring, because it's pretty clear people aren't going to have Tech 19 tractoring when they're flying a Tech 19 ship.
Yeah, and even though I took it off of the ship on the test server, it's still the point still stands.
Yeah.
And some of the capital ships and other ships have weapons that are, rated the same as a ship. And a lot of people get piloting first and get in the ship. Can't use the inbuilt or super item weapon until later. I mean, there's a lot of them like that. And now they won't be able to fly them at all.
It seems to me that in most cases or all cases, the inbuilts are intended as stronger items, so I don't see why there's a problem with having them being sticky items that can't be removed from the ship but can be unequipped. And that would solve this problem as well, and also solve some problems where people might want a little bit more versatility than being stuck with that item.
Is the problem that the new item code I wrote to prevent exploits just not letting you even undock?
Yes.
Correct.
Oh. We could make an exception for sticky items.
Your code should just disable the item, I think. Like, completely disable it. So that if you have a solar panel... Well, I don't know if it did that if you had like a solar panel though, or like a shield charger that was sticky.
I think it should allow transferring slaves and undocking and all that for any sticky items, and then maybe in the case for super items, just make sure there's a check on tech level when you actually go to use it. Or if there's like a sticky engine or a sticky shield, then you just wouldn't need the skill for it, I guess.
Yeah.
Is there a reason not to have these items be unequipable on the ship? Like with a small number of exceptions, for instance,
Yeah,
testers on battle thatches.
I think there's a good reason for it. We were in this whole long discussion about this the other day. I think it's important because sticky items, built-in items, are balanced to be very strong, but the downside is that you're kind of stuck with it. So I think if you could unequip it, it just becomes too much of a good thing.
It's also very messy. Imagine flying around with an unequipped capital engine with your like enzyme thrust equipped. I mean, it's better to just allow you to use the item if it's something like a core item that you would only have one of.
Okay, like the Earth Force prototype has that inbuilt super weapon. It's there, but until you have Weaponry 19, you just can't use it. And it's been that way since them ships come out. That's the way all of them used to be.
Is that okay if we go back to that system, Goofy?
Oh yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's the understanding is the item's there, but you can't use it till you get the skill to use it. But you still can use a ship.
Looks like that what you're observing is not even intended. Basically, looks like Jeff is going to be able to change the code around. Is that right,
Cool.
Jeff?
Yeah, it was never really intended that you would need the skills for everything to undock. It was more, we were worried about exploits involving extra augmenters or extra energies or extra shields from the new class stuff. So I wrote a more robust sort of check system, because I know there's also currently exploits in the game you can do with capping slaves and reclassing and things like that. So the new system catches all that too, but I just didn't think about the sticky stuff. So that'll be it. Should be an easy change.
Cool.
All
That's
right,
awesome.
that answers my question.
Thanks for asking that. I guess we didn't think of that situation, Goofy. Did we fix, by the way, Jeff and Hobart, did we fix the issue with not being able to capture certain wild bots because of this?
Because of what?
Because they happen to have something equipped that has like a lock on it. Wasn't that a problem, Hobart?
The problem I was told about was that a lot of AI lost hull space and you couldn't cap them, and so I changed that so you can now cap overhauled AI. I didn't do anything else.
Or was it that they had too many AUGs equipped? I know some was,
Oh yeah, some of them had too many AUG.
Oh, but if I do the sticky thing, AUGs are sticky.
I don't think ships have inbuilt AUGs though.
Well, a wide variety of issues actually, because there were too many AUGs. There were also ones with too many weapons. There were also ones with too many diffusers, and a variety of other things. Because a lot of AI don't respect the rules about what is able to be equipped on the item, and it's just like any of the useful ones, like multi-fire ice picks and things like that.
Maybe wild capping just shouldn't even do
Jack
that
is
check.
saying, I think Jack is saying we fixed that already. Is that right? Okay, so when it comes to wild capping, or by wild capping, do you mean capturing any wild AI, or specifically into like a wild bot?
Who, me?
It was any AI.
Yeah, Jeff. Do you mind if people can capture like a wild AI and then dock it, even if they have like naughty stuff equipped?
You know, I put that code into the capping because I had in mind how you used to be able to cap other people's ships, but I guess you can't even do that anymore, can you?
No.
You can't cap anyone's ship out from under them.
So I could probably just take the whole check out of all capping, right?
All right, let's do that.
Because even if it's a regular, like you cap it and then you can dock it, it doesn't really matter if it's has too many augs or whatnot, because once you dock it, you won't be able to like upgrade its stuff and then undock it, because we have the check and undock.
Yeah, so we can just take that check off of capping. Are you taking note of this, or do you want me to send you notes on these resolutions,
Oh,
Jeff?
I'm wandering around outside. I wasn't taking notes.
All right, I'll take some notes down for you here. So that should do some good work there.
I've got a question. If there's
Okay,
nobody
Vic.
else on, when is the? You guys did a lot of fixes, a lot of things. That's cool. I'd like to test it out. When would I be able to do that?
Good question. Hober has been racing through this stuff. I mean, yesterday he told me it was going to be till Friday, but now most of the tasks I gave him, maybe all the tasks,
They're
are
all
already
done.
completed. So that's awesome. I think the main question mark at this point is that, as I mentioned, we definitely want to do some internal testing just to make sure that things look reasonable before we trespass on all your time again and ask you to do another testing event, because we don't want you getting on there and having your time wasted. So I'm going to be working with Newman to get a little bit of internal testing together just to sanity check it and make sure things are what we had in mind for them. And I can't give you a time on that yet because we have to schedule it, and we
That's
all
fine.
have day jobs, so it takes a little bit of time to get that together. It's not to be honest with you all, the reason balance testing is taking us longer, it's like a bit of a sticking point for us, is you can't just really do it as a one. It's much more efficient to do as a group, because then you can try more content. But then to schedule a time where multiple devs can all get together and do it gets harder, instead of something that we can all do on our own asynchronously. So that has been a pain point for us. But we will keep on it and try to give you updates, even if it's not full on like, okay, new testing event, go ahead. I will update you all on a regular basis as to the progress we're making on this, so you can kind of get a sense for the progression and where we're and when that next testing event is coming up.
Okay. I think a fair way to say this is, before this completely gets changed again, will we be able to test it? You don't have to put a time limit on it, but
let me put it this way. It should look a lot more like what you saw in testing event 1.
Okay.
So it's not a case of like testing events 1, 2, and 3 being all totally different. Testing event 2 is an outlier. It shouldn't have occurred the way it did. And I want you I want the testing events to be more of a clear polish and progression. So if you had a chance to try stuff out in the first testing event, what you see on the third should be like that, but with improvements such as new rarity tiers, with improvements such as the hulls are going to be balanced better and make more sense. If you all remember, those of you who did participate in the first testing event, one big feedback item we received was that we had only converted support freighters into the new hull system, which meant that capships and light fighters were just all over the place. And one of our commitments to you was, okay, before we do another testing event, we're going to convert all the remaining hulls into the new hull system, which we did do, except it was not ready for prime time when testing event 2 happened. So treating testing event 2 as more of an outlier or an aberration, what you should expect in testing event 3 is us making good on that commitment to bring those hulls into line, the non-support freighter hulls. And part of that will also be to touch up their baseline speed and capacity so that we don't have problems of your setup suddenly being very slow or not having enough hull space to carry all your gear.
Am I allowed to request a baseline, please?
What would you like to request?
There is no reason, in my view, why a ship which is expected to be in combat should travel any slower than 80 space speed.
So you want to propose a baseline speed of 80?
Yes, for all combat ships. If it's not expected to ever see combat, awesome. Whatever's good. But if it's in combat, it has to be able to maneuver on some level.
It's a reasonable proposal. So as we go through the hull sheet, we can take that under advisement and see if that's going to be a good baseline that we want to go forward with.
Excuse me a minute.
Yes, Goofy.
just like I was noticing on test, my Divine Behemoth was extremely nerfed in speed. It was going slower than Dark Freighters. It was going slower than the. It had a slower base speed than the Bulk Trader 2. Now I use that to service and set bases, and some planets run over 60 to 80 to even 100 speed, and I was lucky to get 60 speed out of my Divine Behemoth, and on live I get 112.
Okay, yeah, it sounds to me like I was saying, the hull space and the speeds on the ships were all out of whack in the last testing event. And in the case of Divine Behemoth, I have a feeling that rarity tiers are going to help us out there. But overall, we will revisit that, and I'm assuming Hober can have a quick look at that ship as well to see what's going on with it.
We've got a lot of work to do when it comes to industrial freighters. It's going to take
Very well.
some work, yeah.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye on industrial freighters, Goofy.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding the rarity tiers.
Mhm.
Currently, it seems like the rarity tiers are kind of all over the place. I don't know if this was talked about. I've been in and out of here. In each tech level, it seems like all of the content is trying to be as good as each other, where there's not really that kind of progression where there's like an early game Tech 22 stuff like the subspace, and then peaking at like KD and Twisted Zone. Like some of the stuff seems to be trying to be better than where it's gotten from. Is that going to be kind of, I don't know, made a little more progression like?
So part of the reason for having new rarity tiers is so that we can reflect that things like endgame loot from Twisted is ultimately harder to obtain than some of the good loot from Subspace. So Twisted probably should have been Tech 23 or Tech 24 in terms of how powerful it is and how challenging the content is designed to be. But since it was created at Tech 22, we need a new rarity tier to capture that.
I actually have a slight question here.
Let me make sure I've actually answered Bill's question at this point.
Sure.
So where are we at?
Yeah, for them, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Just kind of seemed like any content that was added or changed was trying to be better than where it was gotten from. Like there's just more and more exotic gear coming from places where it doesn't seem like it should be coming from.
Can you give an example of an item that doesn't really seem like it should be exotic?
Not off the top of my head.
Are we thinking of something from KD or Twisted specifically?
No, in fact, I think more of the KD and Twisted stuff should be exotic in terms of the difficulty compared to like some of the subspace stuff is like some of the built stuff and the drones are all exotic.
Yeah. Yep. So the rarity
Where
tiers are going to give us the ability to differentiate those more, to properly reflect the difficulty of acquiring them.
All right.
Ren, you had something?
Yeah. Are we going to see more overlap between tiers and tech levels with the expansion of the tier levels? So, like a tier 10 uber rare item will be the same as a tier 15 common item or something.
I don't know that it's easy to answer your question in this meeting in the way you want it answered.
Okay.
That's a good question, Dow, as to having resets, multiple resets, considering how many different ships on a single character might need to have their augmenters changed around. My hope is that you would not have to re-aug non-combat ships, but we're going to have a look at where industrial freighters are at, and overall, like hulls that are being used for trade bot purposes to see how that is. We'll have to have a look at that. That's a good point. Because if trade bots need to be reogged, then that's a ton of reogging per character in principle.
Yeah.
Since augmenters are being changed to a rarity system and sort of like a point-based system, is that how I'm understanding it?
The system is still the same. It's just the math behind it has been refined. That's all. It's the same system, but we're just making sure that the OGs follow actual rarity tiers and that the stats are properly accounted for. So, for example, I'll give you an example. If you gave something a lot of plus visibility on an augmenter, it would allow you to give it a lot of stats in something else. And conversely, if you gave something a lot of minus visibility, the sheet did not recognize a lot of minus visibility as being as powerful as it actually is, right? Going from minus 80% to minus 90% is a huge difference.
Yeah. I think this might be a good opportunity to see about creating a custom augmenter, sort of some sort of content where you can do that. If it's going to be, created in this sort of way where you can kind of quantify the value of augmenters more easily through the rarity system, maybe it's a good time to introduce a credit sync where you can make your own custom augmenters and provide some sort of advertising thing for the game as well for more variety.
I just want to point out that the rarity system does not change the ease with which we can make OGs. It just lets us make stronger OGs, that's all. It lets us mark OGs as being stronger than they were before. It doesn't do anything for like the ease of making anything.
Yeah, so it would down the road make it possible in principle for us to allow people to design custom augmenters.
Yeah.
It's definitely out of scope for this project. This project is already a huge and sprawling thing, so we don't want to add more bells and whistles to it. If anything, I'd like to remove some, but it would potentially open that up. Let's just discuss another day if that's a thing we even want to do.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for answering.
Yeah, no problem. So, Kurt, let me get this right. Kitraroon has asked about the NG damage control skill and overall design of the classes and their sub-skills. So here's the thing. With damage control in particular, I know you all are, some people are saying we really feel like it should be toggleable because it's kind of scary to have it on all the time and potentially take damage and not be able to cycle your drones or take other actions because you're out of energy. When we designed that skill, we already had internal discussions about this, and then we were pretty split. Like, should it be toggleable? Would it be okay not? And my recommendation at the time was, let's put it in without a toggle and see if we can get it to work that way. Because I know you all already have so many items hotkeyed. I would like to avoid that. And my general idea is, if I can avoid it, I don't want a sub-skill that you obtain to require an item. I'm not that thrilled, for example, about the way Sniper Analyzer works or any of the other skills where the whole point of the skill is mediated through an item you have to equip or not. I'm just not that big a fan of it. So, as Bill says, I'm wondering if the consensus of testing really is that this skill is unfun to play in its current form, maybe we can fix this another way by, for example, only making it work when you're over 50% energy. Or maybe we can solve the problem just by changing the way by taking away the flat energy upfront deployment cost of drones, something like that. So can we get a little creative and figure out a way to make it work without creating a toggle? I just think the more we create toggle-based skills, the messier the interface gets, and I'd like to avoid that if possible.
Would it be possible to implement some sort of system where you can have an item automatically use itself when it's off cooldown? Like, say, for instance, the super item that gives you like 200 energy regen, that might be a helpful one, for instance.
We have that in the Panther tweak, for example. Right? It's just a cycling tweak.
Yeah.
That's the same thing as using itself automatically.
Okay, yeah, maybe that would be a good system then for changing some of the current problems.
I'm not seeing that. Feels like it would be a very different kind of mechanic to me than what it does right now. Do we feel really strongly about having half the drone deployment cost deducted up front? So part of that was to try to make energy bank more important to engineers, right, Hopper?
Can you say that again, please?
Yeah.
Jeff is saying yeah. So the provisional change we made where drone deployment now costs half the energy up front and then half as a charging cost. That was one of the many ways we're trying to make energy bank valuable to engineers.
Yeah,
right?
we're trying to make sure that you don't just go full regen. And if you don't go full regen, even when you're being shot, you will have energy to deploy your drones. Like I tested the extremes out to make sure that this was the case.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the only reason either.
Well, yeah, Jeff can speak to that.
The other reason, at least for me, is I feel like going into combat with a whole set of fully charged drones is very, very strong. And so this kind of partially mitigates that.
Dow, were you going to say something?
Yeah, it was more just the general feel of it, because I think we originally had a situation. Well, yeah, we did have a situation where there was a cost on deployment. Then we moved away from that, and then we're sort of moving towards it again. I would agree that it does require more testing on my part, because I didn't test that extensively because of the aforementioned reasons. But I was using a hybrid half bank, half regen setup, and it didn't really feel good.
Can you be more specific about what didn't feel good?
I was banking out. I was using two Galagoy Vazar atomic packs, which is, well, I can't actually remember the test stats, but on Liberty, it's quite a high bank and decent regen energy. And I found myself banking out when I was hot swapping.
Which drones, though? This is another question.
Twisted Blaster Disasters. But yeah, I completely appreciate it. Probably requires more testing, but early indications were from myself and a couple of other engineers that it didn't have a good feel to it. So it could just be a case of tweaking it, reducing the on deployment elect costs. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no one says it has to be 50-50.
There's multiple parts to that for sure.
I mean, one part is how you allocate the energy cost, which is on use or charging, and the other part is what the total energy is, right? If you're spending 15 minutes hot swapping drones, it doesn't really matter if half of it is on use or not, because you still have to pay the same energy, right? If you say you're constantly banking out hot swapping, that might be more of a function of the total energy cost.
It's the drone itself. The drone has a huge energy bank, and so it takes a lot of energy to deploy. It's got a big shield bank too. It's a really powerful drone, so it takes a lot of energy to deploy. That's why he's having our time.
That makes sense.
Let's let Dow speak.
It might have been compounded by out of combat regen. So deploying all your drones and then having a situation where you're not regenning as much, it was difficult to scoop them and relay them. But yeah, it requires more testing.
And of course, the testing can't really be done until the stats of the items are like solidified to a certain extent. So, Earthkeeper, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow on from Jeff's point. What he said seems to suggest that you want to go to a system where engineers won't be able to deploy all their drones at once, and so they won't immediately have 7 drones available while fighting. And it seems to me that's quite a difficult balance place to be in, because all other classes have all of their, with the exception of Sniper that has to build it up a little over time, all classes have all of their power available up front immediately all the time. So if engineers are in a case where their fight has to be longer and spread out for the power to be available, that just makes them a slower class to play, especially for solo content. And that doesn't feel like a good thing to me.
All other classes have to.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All other
classes.
classes.
Say that or imply it.
Yeah, all other classes have to have energy in order to do anything. An engineer doesn't have to have any energy on live to deploy their drones. You can pre-charge it and have zero bank, and you can drop them. He implied that um, not being that being able to pre-charge everything and to be able to come into a fight like and not have any energy bank but still deploy your drones was the thing that didn't seem balanced.
Yeah, let's get specifically to the comment. We aren't saying you're supposed to like deploy your drones over a minute. We're just saying you should have to start spending energy when you start fighting. That's all.
The intention is to have it so that engineers with reasonable bank can still deploy all their drones at once. It'll just be an energy cost. I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah,
I was just having the issue with the mentality of not being able to do it and doing it over time. That's
that
fine.
was never the implication of the statement. We just got to make sure that the energy stats are balanced correctly. I mean, maybe it should only be like a fifth of the total energy cost up front. I don't think we're particularly wedded to the exact proportion. It just should be some amount that is like to the point that it matters to have energy when you start fighting. So we see another question in the chat. Bot PhD and Droney becoming more obligatory because they now confer a portion of your class skills. Jeff, do you want to take that one?
I think it's important. Especially bot PhD. A lot of the changes we've made to combat bots over the last couple of years have really made combat bots a lot stronger. And I don't think it's unreasonable that if you're going to lean heavily into combat bots, you have to spend one of your 3 advanced subskills on it to really maximize it. We also didn't make it completely required. We made it so, let's see, you used to get 50%, and now if you get bot PhD, you get 60% of your skills. But if you don't have it, you get 30%. So it's you're a little bit weaker if you don't have it, and you're a little bit stronger if you do have it.
I guess one of my problems with the bot PhD skill at the moment is how much differently it affects different classes. Like my example is Speed Demon. With Speed Demon, without the bot PhD skill, and with the bot PhD skill, the difference in DPS of the slaves is 65%. I tested that on test server, and I don't think the skills are changing. So it's a huge difference. Whereas something on like Gunner that doesn't have so much inbuilt like bonus that matters for bots on the skill, it doesn't make as much of a difference. And I'm not sure that feels right when these aren't different classes that are supposed to be differently with bots.
Then my question is how much damage are your bots doing compared to you yourself?
I wasn't really able to change to get sensible bot setups on test server recently because of the augmenter issues, so I can't really answer that.
No, he means like the percentage difference between your bot and yourself. Like what's the ratio of damage that your bot is doing compared to your main ship?
They're saying like the change. Well, I mean, any third slot on the speed demon for the classical doesn't really give you much extra, so bot PhD is a no-brainer.
No, he means like how much damage. So if your speed demon does 100k damage, what percentage of that DPS is your bot doing?
Oh, I could get about 50 or 60% of the damage out with bots with what I was using.
An individual bot or all of them?
That was overall. They weren't particularly well optimized.
Yeah, so let's say your 2 bots do 50% of your damage, right? And bot PhD makes them do 50% more. Then that essentially makes that skill worth 25% of your DPS, which is it's definitely strong, but I don't know that it's insane.
But I guess you compare that to a skill like what you might choose instead would be the evasion skill or something that gives 5% crit chance. 5% crit chance isn't worth 25% DPS. So I wonder that I know they're supposed to be player choice, but a lot of these with bot PhD being so strong, the other advanced subskills aren't balanced with respect to it.
It sounds like we need to make the other advanced class subskills actually impactful. Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I could certainly see that as a solution to it.
Yeah, because
I
in
mean-
fairness, even if it's 25% strong, it's only 25% if you play with bots.
Which
So
is a pain in the neck
And
sometimes.
it costs a lot,
And a
yeah.
big cost.
the true value of that skill is somewhere south of 25% because it has a contingency, unlike 5% crit chance, which is good unless you happen to be maxed on crits already. So
Yeah, I
but
think we
agree
need to
with you
do more
that
work
as
on
it
that.
stands, definitely 5% crit chance is not as strong as what you're describing.
But there's two ways of looking at it. One way is, given that you're using bot, this skill becomes mandatory now. But another way of looking at it is using bots becomes less mandatory because it frees up another skill. So I think that is an improvement. But we're definitely going to be looking at all the advanced subskills of Speed Demon and the other classes as well. I think
So
if
go
you
ahead.
look at the advanced subskills that we've redone for Shield Monkey and Engineer, you'll see that they're stronger than they used to be, especially for Shield Monkey.
Can I get some confirmation on whether we put thrust back on combat bot tweaking?
No, we
put
increased the
speed.
speed.
Oh, okay. We should
We gave them
probably
more
put
speed
that
than they used to have.
We should probably put the movement stats back on then.
Well, I didn't for a reason. I don't know if you want to get into
Oh.
it now or not.
Interesting.
I
But
think
it
the
was a
player base
deliberate
probably
choice.
would like to get into it.
Yeah, let's have it then.
Yeah, because the speed, I put the speed on there for strategic purposes. So you're not sitting around waiting for your bots to get there. But I did not want to give them thrust and turning for tactical purposes. If you want your bots to be more nimble in combat, I think you should use an augmenter or
Interesting.
better engine or less weight on the equipment. Because I think if you just give if you give bots too much thrust and turning so that
Yep.
it essentially becomes irrelevant, like what equipment and what engine you choose, then that's kind of dumb. So
Jeff, I will say regarding mastodons, I'm using Shivarog on it, and my bots are drifting out when neutralized blasts are shooting.
And Shivar Og has thrust on it.
Neutralizing blast also has a lot of knockback, like a huge amount as a radiation
Yeah,
weapon.
that's why I'm saying that.
well,
So
if you take a weapon,
thrust. Yeah.
if you have a weapon with a ridiculous knockback and your ships are getting knocked back, that sounds reasonable to me. Like, I don't know.
Hill, were you finding that your bots were struggling to keep up on autopilot as well?
The speed is okay at moment, but knockback on the neutralized blasts are too big for my bots to handle them.
Why do those weapons have knockback in the first place? They're not physical, are they?
Nope, they're not physical. It's a flavor
That was
choice.
Jack, by the way, speaking, another content developer.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
My understanding of those weapons is that they were sort of intentionally made stronger with the drawback that they have knockback. So it doesn't seem to me to be a. But I mean, the weapons are a problem in general because everybody wants to use them because they're way too strong. So them being having that drawback, and this being a more important drawback, just means that people will make other weapon choices, and that's a good thing. I'm not sure if the dev team thinks the same way, but anyways.
I think that Jeff gave a good explanation of why speed was put back on, but thrust we're less keen on putting back on. It does sound like maybe that weapon is a little bit out of control. Maybe it's not a good weapon for bots.
Might need a bit of a middle ground on it then.
What
There's
middle
inertial
ground?
dampening,
right?
I mean, you can just get inertial dampening stats if you need them.
Yeah.
You could put inertial dampening capacitors on there, I guess.
Or just
Yeah.
get inertial dampening mods, which you can do, or AUGs. There's stuff that you can do for it.
I will try to put inertial dampening capacitors on it and test them out.
That would be great.
I just want to say though, I don't know that we're going to be keeping inertial dampening capacitors at the amounts that they are right now. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
They are pretty extreme. So how are we doing, everybody? We're about an hour plus into this meeting. A lot of people have had an opportunity to speak. I can't guarantee we answered all the questions in the chat because it does go by kind of fast, but please speak up again if you gave us some feedback that we didn't answer.
We like speed here, right?
What do you mean by speed?
I haven't fully tested, but it sounded like speed was an issue. Speed hasn't really been talked about. I think speed is fun. Speed for the ship. How is there any way you could summarize that for me? What's going on with that?
Yes. So some ships were slower on the testing event 2. That was because the hull's balance sheet was in disarray, and we can definitely buff speeds of ships.
Oh, okay. So that's why. All right.
So we're going to have to just have a look. I mean, Goofy brought up specifically the Divine Behemoth being really slow. Let's just not even talk about what the speeds were on test 2, on the second testing event. We are going back over the hull sheet. I do not want to just buff ships until everyone is really, really fast. I think that would kind of trivialize the advantage of getting more speed, but I don't want you to feel like you're just limping around either. So we are perfectly happy to increase speeds baseline to a point, and we're not trying to nerf your speed necessarily. Certainly don't want you to feel like you lost like half the speed of your setup. There may be a few ships that are simply going faster than we think they should, but that would be a case of those particular ships, not like overall everything being slower.
Yeah.
Okay.
I arrived just a little bit late. I was wondering, how are the stat check bosses and boss mobs going to behave now with the show rework? Are they going to have less regen, or are they going to have a percentage of their health be regened? Because there's going to be a lot of opportunities to cheese things with dot weapons, preventing the out of combat regen. So I'm just unfamiliar with what's happening for higher end AI and whatnot.
What do you think, Hober?
When you say stat check bosses, what are you talking about?
I'm saying, like, for instance, say Lunari and Avenger. Like, are they going to have a significant amount of in-combat region like they currently do, or are a lot of things just going to be like? Is there any new mechanics replacing that? I just heard some changes were happening to basically make AI. I don't know. Not be as crazy region wise as they are in live.
Yeah, this is gonna have to be on a case by case basis. Like some things are gonna have in combat region at near similar levels as they are on live. Other things might just get changed so that they are more interesting. Like I would prefer if everything just did something if you took too long to fight it. But
That'd be pretty fun, yeah, like some sort of super item that every AI has uniquely, especially like healthy depths, whatnot.
Yeah, just a different thing that each AI does different. It doesn't have to be the same, and every AI doesn't have to have it. But I generally am aware of and sensitive to the fact that if we just across the board nerf in combat regen on AI, then people can just cheese everything with dot weapons.
Exactly.
Yeah. The thing is though, you won't be getting out of combat regen if you're in the same galaxy as an AI that you're fighting. And if you leave and the AI has a charger as well, then they're going to regen. That's an okay. Actually, you've mentioned something that I actually that caused me to think about something else, which is the regeneration of AI outside of combat, and also like shooting AI and then suiciding or dying, and then you regenerating quicker than the AI does. We're gonna have to figure out what to do about that because we don't want the best strat to be super DPS glass cannon, do as much damage as you can, die, get back in because you've regenerated and AI hasn't, right? Like that's just you're just like trading durability for kills at that point, and I don't think that that's interesting or engaging. So we'll have to figure out what to do with that situation too.
Yeah.
Can I make one more comment that just sort of follows on from one thing you just said? There was a lot of talk on the test server. I think particularly people talking about minion leader, but with the amount of damage that the armor item takes, especially with when the armor item is now becoming essentially completely mandatory with how strong it is, you're essentially limiting the length that fights have to be. Which all that does is it raises the bar for how good a squad has to be to do any content because there's a time limit on how much they have to do it, or else they start dying. And that doesn't feel right to me, and I'm not sure what exactly the premise is that that's being done for.
So you have a lot of different questions in that one question, and I'm going to try to answer them one at a time. So the first thing, when you're talking about the armor and how much damage it takes, right? No matter what we do with diffusers, no matter whether we keep them as they are on test or not, right? We have a lot of conversations internally happening around that. Um, the amount of damage your diffuser takes is going to be predicated on the amount of damage that the AI does, right? Because if it has 9 million health points before it takes 1% damage, what really matters is how much damage you're taking. I don't think that we want people to be at 50% diffuser strength after 15 minutes of fighting a boss. I don't want that. I think that's bad. So we're going to be doing some work on making sure that diffusers don't feel like they just break. Outside of any other work we do on diffusers, we don't want them to just feel like something that just crumbles whenever you try to do content. The second thing that you mentioned is um, the idea of like requiring squads to do things quicker. I think it's actually a good idea as a baseline to encourage people to like get through content quickly instead of sitting there for 2 hours grinding it. Sorry, not 2 hours. Sitting there for half an hour grinding it down. I don't know that you need to instantly fail it if you're sitting there for an hour, but it just shouldn't even be a desirable thing to like go in with the least amount of damage that you possibly can do uh, to complete a boss. Like you should want to do it quickly. I think we have a responsibility to make the game such that people want to do things um, rather quickly, rather than taking the slow boat approach. So I think that answers your second question. I think there's a third question you had in there, but if you could repeat the question that, or repeat what you were asking, then I think I can answer that as well.
I think you've addressed my concerns more or less. I will
Oh,
also comment that mini-mo kills were actually 2 hours, so your comment there was correct.
yeah, I don't think
So
it's good to sit for 2 hours to kill something. I don't think it's good to sit for more than 20 minutes actually. If you're doing like you should be able to shave most boss fights in my ideal world to 20 minutes or less if you're actually like doing every mechanic and you're taking into account like you're taking all the advantages that you can. So if it's been designed for 5 people, 20 minutes. 20 people, 20 minutes, right? Obviously it'll scale up or down based on the stats of the players, but I think people
Bills
go ahead.
and One Lurker have both asked, why is it that Bot PhD doesn't just give a nice suite of combat skills? Uh, since some classes like Engineer gains barely anything from taking it, and some classes like Sniper and Speed Demon gain a lot. Do you want to speak to that, Jeff?
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, the reason I did it that way is because I wanted the combat bots to be flavored by the class that runs them. So Speed Demons combat bots are fast and fire quickly and can keep up with them. Berserker's bots will have the multi-fire, and Shield Monkey bots will be tanky. If it was just a bunch of generic ship mastery stats or whatever, then I'm a little scared. It'll just everyone in the game will have the exact same combat bots.
It's a good point about like bots multi-firing if the class multi-fires. I think that's a pretty solid point. I guess we do have to kind of take responsibility for the fact that if you're looking at a class that doesn't have a lot of stats that a combat bot would make use of, that means their bots will be weaker, right?
And I think that's okay. I don't think we need to say every class can have the same kind of combat bots. I mean, classes are balanced over a lot of different factors.
So it sounds like the message coming down from Jeff here is that if you use a class that doesn't really benefit bots very much, and you want to use bots, then that's a reason to not take bot PhD.
Can I ask a question here?
Let
I
me
had
first
asked
hold on,
earlier.
Ren. Hold on. Let me see if the people who've asked this question, what they think about that response, because that seems to be where Jeff is at the moment. So that would be One Lurker and Bills. Jack does point out, though, the +1 Ogden +1 energy. Do they only get that if you take bot PhD? I mean,
No, you can put that on
you can
and
just
then
put it on,
yeah.
right, and launch them. So
Engineer
in that case,
has very little reason to take bot PhD.
yeah. So it seems like the response is that there's not really, it doesn't have to be a point for every class. Some classes may benefit from taking other advanced subskills instead. You would not take it as an engineer, basically.
Gives you +8 slots, One Lurker, please.
That's pretty useful, right?
If you have something that you're doing with an extra 8 slots, it might be useful.
Yeah, I mean it's a little useful. That's it's like a scrupling.
Currently, plans to add more advanced subskills.
I would love to add more advanced sub skills. I've been pushing for that internally. I've been pushing for changing them. I don't know what we'll decide to do, but I'm with you on that.
I mean, I think you can see we've made a lot of changes to the advanced subskills of Shield Monkey and Engineer, and I would strongly guess that we're going to see similar things to the other classes.
I love the variety you guys have chosen to go forward with. I think it's really cool that Engineer in Shield Monkey can actually do DPS now with their main ship. I would love to see more unique skills like that for the other classes for the next upcoming reworks.
Yeah, I think we can count on that. Somebody was asking, it seems like one way to ask the question is droning mandatory for engineer? Do we want it to be mandatory? Is it mandatory at the moment?
I feel it's mandatory.
I don't know why. Why would it be? Why is it mandatory?
Well, they're asking, so what should they take instead of it?
Well,
As an engineer, you feel pretty much 100% obliged to get +1 temporary drone. There's no choice about it, which is something a lot of people have remarked about.
yeah, it does represent potentially 15% or more. Actually, more if you're now deciding to use an Aura. Well, actually, no, you're always going to use an Aura drone. But yeah, like it does represent like a 15% increase in effective output. And I don't know whether or not any of the other advanced class subskills give upwards of that for engineer. Again, I think this means that it is required of us to make sure that the other advanced class subskills are competitive with that. I think that's where our responsibility is there.
I think it's okay to have a semi-required advanced subskill as long as it's not 2 or 3 that are required, and then there's no choices. Gosh, one change I might propose on that would be to just make droning not available to engineers, and scale up the drones like 10%.
I mean, maybe we should just have different advanced like something that I think could be cool is right now we have a bunch of different advanced class subskills that every class is able to get, right? Like, and then we have a bunch of advanced class subskills that only certain classes can get. Something that I think would be really cool is if we use the entire circle that we have, right? Like we've got 10, is this 10 slots or am I tripping? 1, 2, 3, whatever. We've got like 11 slots that you can pick advanced class subskills from.
11.
Yeah, and what if all of them were specific to the class? Like you could literally pick from 11 different things.
Too much.
But it does create a situation where like people can do different things and they have different choices, you know? Like and then there won't be mandatory options at that point because it's just you could do whatever you want.
Oh, how about utility subskills, which are all the existing ones that are generic, and you can choose like maybe 2 utility subskills, and then the 3 advanced subskills can consist of class specific ones.
That's a lot of skills. I mean,
it would be a lot of time until it's all completed, but like it's a cool concept.
I mean, the problem is that giving people more skills they can use is always going to have some advantage. Like, it always improves something because people get like more shiny things, they get more abilities. So that when you think of it that way, it's always going to appear to be a positive move. But there is a hidden negative move, which is it makes it harder for us to give interesting choices when we give you so many things. And
yeah,
it
complexity
also,
is a negative.
exactly, yeah. And then it also just becomes more complex, and we already have hundreds of skills in this game. So there are hidden drawbacks to just giving you 5 slots instead of 3 and saying, well, 2 of these have to be a certain kind.
Okay.
Well, I agree with not giving more slots. I'm just saying more choices for those slots is more so what I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, when I look at adding any particular feature, I always try to weigh what it gives you versus the complexity, because the complexity is a very real cost.
Somebody's asking, bot PhD feels mandatory for any DPS class. I mean, we haven't done a design pass on the DPS classes yet, so I think you can expect that their advanced subskills will get a similar treatment to the ones that we've seen for Shield Monkey and Engineer. And in the main, we should be having more exciting advanced subskills that you might start thinking about taking instead of bot PhD.
Yeah, and
But, yeah.
you also might see that some of the skills on classes might move and shift from just being like percent bonuses to actual mechanics and effects for things. Like, I'm just gonna throw this out here. Like, maybe this is just random. This is not something that we've actively talked about. But like, if a berserker is being shot from the front, they take less damage. Like, there's nothing to like inherit from there, right? Like, that's a core mechanic that just works based on the player themselves. You can't like inherit that or pass that on to bots.
One of the things that makes me a little bit uncertain as a player here, hearing this sort of stuff talked about, all of those abilities would be great, and it'll be great once the combat rework's done. But we're going to be ending up in a situation where we're here for 3, 6, 12 months between now and the combat rework, where the advanced skills are wonky on the other classes.
That's a good call out.
It is, although I would push back a bit on the idea of whether the advanced subskills are wonky. I think that what we're looking at is maybe at worst, the combat classes are now feeling pressure to take bot PhD. But I would not say that rises to the level of being, quote, wonky. I think, like, okay, I wish that the other advanced subskills competed with it, but in the end, it's still a net buff to the class. It's not that great an inconvenience. Or are you seeing it differently from me?
It's not necessarily only the bot PhD thing. It's just there have been a number of changes in general, like changes to energies and things like this, that it then gets discussed will be worked out once the combat rework is done. And I'm nervous about there being too many changes that affect all the other classes strongly that will then be fixed once the combat rework is done. And not having done it all at once makes it give a problematic interlude.
I agree. We don't want to just we don't want to use that as our get out of jail free card. So part of what we would like to get to, we'd like to get to a point in testing where we have identified any critical pain points like that and address them in advance so that we don't need to then rush the combat rework through to get things back to a playable state. By all means, things should be in a playable state when this project goes live. And that doesn't mean that everything is going to stay exactly the same when we do the combat rework, but after this project, for the remaining combat class reworks, I would like for them to just be more of a matter of improving things and giving more interesting mechanics, not actually changing the core balance of the game.
I have a question. I've asked this of you before, and I'd like to throw this out there in meeting. Engineer gets a flat bonus to a broad range of stats. I think it's currently 20%. It used to be like 10. If that were increased substantially to say 40%, then bot PhD would be useful on engineer, not because you're getting a direct DPS bonus, but rather because engineer's bots can now support a more DPS focused AUG loadout than other bots can support. Does that make sense? And is that something you'd be willing to consider?
It's it's not a particular design objective to make bot PhD useful for engineer. That's not something that we're like specifically trying to do. So as long as engineer bots are pretty good already, which is the intention because they're supposed to get an extra energy and an extra augmenter, as long as they are good, which does need to be tested, we don't need engineer to benefit that much from bot PhD.
Speaking of bots, for Tech 23, is there going to be another bot research level to allow 3 Tech 20s, or are you guys actually going to make a remote control 21?
I don't know.
Undecided.
Okay.
Somebody has asked, what's going on here?
Oh, I could add something to that.
Go ahead.
To that question. My tendency is to lean against that and to keep 20 as the max. But we were also talking about, I don't know if it would be a skill or what, but something that would increase the max tech level of your bots by like 2 or something, but also reduce your slots by half. So like you could get 2 Tech 20 bots or 1 Tech 22 pod, something like that.
Like a wing man. That's pretty cool. Like a Necromancer from Borderlands. That's pretty cool, actually.
I think it's fair to say we're not going to just like suddenly wake up one day and say, okay, you can all get RC21 now.
Yeah.
I think bot
That's
research
what's not going to happen.
is probably better. Like the
An afternoon thing.
Yeah, after a nice long nap.
Is it safe to assume that you'll need P23 to get RC21?
It's impossible to answer that question because we're not planning on just releasing RC21. It's safe to assume that you can't get RC21 now.
Yeah, I would definitely lean more towards bot research. I feel like that'd be the more balanced play here, honestly.
I would be more amenable to eventually allowing 3 Tech 20 ships, I guess. That seems like a more incremental and safe move.
Yeah,
We'll
it would
see.
only require adding a skill that gives more slots. I think like our
Yeah.
remote something research. But actually, I'm not amenable to adding another Tech 20 bot because of the linear nature of increase in aug power. Like that's actually more powerful than giving people Tech 21 bots. Adding another Tech 20 bot gives them more power than 3 Tech 20. Gives them more power than Tech 21 bots.
2 Tech 20s and a Tech 18 versus 3 Tech 20s shouldn't be that much difference, though.
No, I'm saying 3 Tech 20s versus 2 Tech 21s is more
I would
powerful.
say-
Probably. We'd have to look at the numbers there. Obviously, we're not going to just release more bot research.
Yeah, 3 Tech 20s I would say are probably even stronger than 2 Tech 22s because of the way that aug mods work.
I'd probably agree with Hober on this.
Yeah, we'll have to look at it. So there was another question. The release schedule for T23 content, how does it fit in with this? We actually have 5 of 6 Tech 23 World Boss Roamers already designed and pending testing. These eventually will go into Calthy Depths, and they're part of a larger upgrade to Calthy Depths to give you a lot more stuff to do there. Obviously, we can't test these things comprehensively until we settle on the stats of items and balance, right? So the way I'm viewing the ensuing combat focus rework and recon focus and so on, I don't think those should be nearly as disruptive. I'm confident they're not going to be anywhere close to as disruptive a balance as this project has been. So with the plan still of finishing this project to the community's satisfaction and our own, well in advance of the coming reset in October. We would then also test those world bosses and the other upgrades to Calthy Depths, and those things would be then released. The T23 world bosses and so on all would be released in time for the October reset. That's the schedule I have in my mind. So obviously we do have to finish this project before we can properly test the T23 content. But it's not like the T23 content is going to be held up indefinitely while we then go and do the other 6 combat classes. I don't think there's any reason for that.
Can't wait to see them.
I am also very much looking forward to participating in testing on them. I'm very excited about those, and it's unfortunate that that work is being overshadowed by this project, but we'll get there when we get there, and I think people are going to be pretty happy about them.
I just want to flag a quick comment about combat bots and engineers, which is that with the amount of energy they have, missiles and fighters may be a real balance point of concern because of how much they'll be able to have energy to fire weapons and missiles at the same time, which bots generally can't do right now. And missiles can do quite a bit of DPS for bots.
It could be the advantage of having engineer bots, actually.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm just commenting on something to flag that should be considered when balancing them.
That's true.
Sounds
I mean,
cool.
I disagree with that because my bots and all my alt bots can fire fighters and shoot at the same time, pretty much stable. So I disagree with that.
Fighters is okay. Missiles is the big one that uses huge amounts of energy. If you're trying to do missiles every 5 seconds out of a cap ship that are MIRVs, you're burning all your energy out, even with energy mods.
It's not really that bad though. I mean, realistically, I don't think it's a good idea to have bots spamming missiles. That's for the player.
I generally have bots spamming missiles on my players at the moment for classes like engineer that don't get combat skills because you get a lot of damage out, but that's fine.
There's something I've had in my mind for actually a few years now. Fleet commander has always been really focused about having like a fleet. I was wondering if you could potentially have an advanced sub-skill implemented where you could take away wild bots altogether if you chose that skill to have more fighter slots, especially with the Olympus fighters coming out now. I feel like it'd be a really cool playstyle to have like a hive ship or a carrier sort of playstyle.
I
Do you
think
guys feel about that?
when we go over classes, we will pay very special attention to like what each advanced class subskill does to the class. Like it should feel like you're making a serious decision when you pick one. And maybe something like that would happen, maybe not. I don't know, but I get where you're coming from. That's
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
A couple items have come up in the chats. Bio has been talking about repairing during fights and how it doesn't feel fun to have your armor degrading, your diffuser degrading. Is it so that we are trying to get these bosses balanced? So that's the main time constraint? Or I had the impression that in a typical fight, we don't want your diffuser to have gotten damage to the extent that it's the thing that's causing you to hurry.
No, that we're not using the. So there are a lot of different ways to encourage people to hurry up. We're not relying on the durability to do that, but the durability does play a role in that. I don't know how to put this. Like, it's one of many things that can encourage you to go faster. It's not the thing we're leaning on. And right now on the test server, AI do a lot of damage compared to player defenses, right? We haven't gotten the AI balance yet. So it's quite possible that Twisted could do half or a third of the damage it's doing right now. And therefore, this time would increase to 45 minutes, which, right, like that's probably more than enough time to kill Twisted before having to repair. So you see,
So the upshot to Bio is just simply that's not supposed to happen. We don't want your diffuser to be breaking that fast, and you shouldn't feel like the pace of the fight is being set by your diffuser durability.
I think there's an issue in that the durability on armors and diffusers kind of work really differently for Zerkers than everyone else. Their durabilities were more balanced for a regular player sort of soloing or part of a squad taking splash damage and whatnot, and not so much balanced for a Zerker taking huge amounts of concentrated damage for a long time. And I think if a Zerker tries to use a volatile type armor or diffuser, it is going to give out really quickly.
they were seeing reduction even in non-volatile, like in the ones that are stable though, Jeff. Like that's what I was.
Yeah, and I think that's something we need to look at. I think one thing is if you're a Zerger, you should probably take the most stable armor you can find, even though the stats aren't as good, unless you really know up front that you're going to beat that battle in 5 minutes or something, or 2 minutes, or and I completely believe that we still need to do something more, like make something part of the Zerker class where they're durability goes down slower or something.
I
I'm
would
not
dislike it
I
being part of the class because you previously said you want to move away from Zerker being the only tanks, and that would do the opposite.
Yeah, I do want to say that we might want to be careful about pigeonholing Berserker as the tank. Like something that players have been really excited about is the prospect of not having Berserker be the only tank and be the main tank, like being able to play as a DPS Berserker and not worry about tanking. So I think we need to be careful.
Maybe we just need to up the durabilities altogether. I mean, what we have with the durabilities right now is kind of a starting point. It's not something that we particularly analyzed thoroughly and said this is where we are.
Yeah, I think we need to do that after we get damage values for AI and player and survivability and healing, because the damage your armor takes is predicated on the damage that the boss does, which is predicated on the defenses of the player as well as the healing that a player squad can be expected to output. So like we have to get all that together first before we can deal with the durability on armor.
So let's have this provisional agreement. So we are going to do our homework basically and get the stats of items locked in more, and then after that we can still be prepared to apply even a pretty large multiplier to diffuser durability and see if that solves the problem. And if it doesn't, then I guess we're going to have to think even more about how we feel about diffusers taking damage like this. Maybe stable ones should not take damage at all when, and it should only be the unstable ones that can break. Maybe the stable ones only take damage when you die. Like
yeah, what if the damage that diffusers take is non-linear?
It is?
I said, what if it was non-linear? That would really help.
What do you mean by that?
The more damaged your armor is, the less damage it takes per shot or whatever.
Could do something. I mean,
so like it takes you 20 minutes to go from 100 to 90%, and it takes you 40 minutes to go from 90 to 80%. It takes you 80 minutes to go from 80 to 70%, that sort of thing.
We'll have to talk internally about what the benefits of doing that are.
Yeah.
Well, it helps balance things.
I would like to shoot back to something One Lurker said. One Lurker has been providing some really good feedback here. I'm actually just going to quote you if I can. So it seems like this player is understanding, is like kind of getting into the main idea with armor, which was we are trying to iron out resist a bit to have them not all over the place, but still allow like these good old porpoise surgical resist vulnerabilities and stuff. Jeff, do you want to respond to their first paragraph there?
I mean, that's what we've done. We've eliminated resistance on ships across the board and put armor instead. Because all the resistances before were just kind of stupid. It was just almost random numbers in 7 different damage types. That made very little sense. So that's the driving theory behind the armor system. It's to simplify it all.
If I can read into their question, why don't, instead of eliminating resistances, except for these like rare vulnerabilities and so on, and applying flat armor, why don't we just set all ship resistances at like 0 or 20 or 30 or whatever the case may be, and then have those same occasional variations? Like, what is the purpose of having a whole new armor mitigation type?
Oh, you mean just get rid of armor?
Yes.
I think armor is thematically good for things like heavy fighters and to some degree cap ships. I think we still want diffusers because it provides some interesting gameplay, and armor on diffusers is a good alternative to just a specific damage type.
We could make a cop all diffuser though.
Yeah, we could do that. That would be the same thing basically.
Basically what armor is cop all with
but it's linear though.
Complexity sprinkled in.
So
why do we need to dock when to equip diffusers?
Because if you didn't, you could just have a whole bunch of cheap volatile armors and just sort of go through them one after another as you're fighting.
Okay.
They become more like tweaks then. instead of gear.
One of the things that's lost with the current system a little bit though is it's harder, especially in places that have multiple areas, to kind of choose what resistance type you want for each room. So you can't kind of it makes it more difficult to use the sort of special resistors that currently exist that might give a large amount to one damage type but not another one. In places where you're moving around and not being able to dock frequently.
I agree on a room by room basis. Although if you are DGing, you could do it on a DG by DG basis, since there are AI bases out in the wild.
I was specifically thinking of things like Olympus. If you want to start in the IO minion room with a resist to fire, and then end up in Zeus with a resistance to the laser sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true. We did take that away. We took that flexibility away with this change.
I'm kind of okay with
I
that.
am
because
too.
I feel like having to know the right diffuser for every bit of content doesn't seem like that much fun. It seems more like work.
It's not intuitive, yeah.
But then I guess my real question with that is not so much taking away that flexibility, but then what is the place you see those sorts of special diffusers that only give resistance to one damage type existing in the future? Because right now I don't see a reason why I would ever use for my one diffuser slot, say the ban of beam diffuser over just a flat one that gives 50 armor.
Because they're
For me,
stronger.
I was going to say there's a couple reasons. One, there are certain thematic places like Ikebana where you might really want a fire diffuser, and that kind of makes sense. You're doing a whole zone of fire. You kind of equip a fire diffuser. It's sort of obvious. And another one is certain ships have holes in them. So if you've got a porpoise ship, maybe a mining diffuser makes more sense to you than armor because you want to try to plug that hole, or surgical. I forget which one it is. I think those are both pretty valid reasons to pick a particular one over a more general one.
So we have another player now bringing up armor. I think that half of this is a readout problem where the client is not being very informative, but the other half is a valid point that since we have multiplicative mitigation on hulls and from diffusers, and we also have an additive armor mitigator, they intersect in a way that's non-trivial for the players to understand. So like the heavy fighter with 182 armor and vulnerability of 10% energy, 100% mining, 50% radiation. I can see how players are like having difficulty digesting all that information. Should we do something about this, Jeff, in terms of the readouts in the client?
Maybe? I don't know. We were talking about that a little bit the other day, weren't we?
Yeah. Okay. So maybe what I can say to you, Dreadlord, is that we'll have some internal conversations about this and then come up with a solution we think would be an improvement, and then we can see what you and the other players think about that. I think it's fair to point out what we're trying to accomplish with armor, which seems like the one lurker with their comment has captured it. We do want to get back to the older days when you have ships that are more or less the same types of resistances, but with a hole here or there. And we also, this is actually another detail that hasn't come up yet. We don't like it that higher and higher tech ships get more and more resistances, because that has like a cumulative effect where you're now also more effective at getting healed, because you get more effective heals if your external resistances are higher. We'd like for ships to be roughly the same tank level when it comes to the hull stats, and for your mitigation to be increased by the gear that you get.
Lurker asked a really interesting question. Why not just give a % omni-resist number instead?
As well as the resist stats, or remove resist stats altogether and have that?
He's saying have it with the resist stat. So you have an omni-resist number, and then you have a vulnerability. So like instead of it saying armor, it just gives you omni-resistance, like in the ship window.
I have to say that's a good point.
I do like having the one way or another, whether it's armor or a different, like an omni resist. I like having the idea that the ship has a baseline mitigation level, and then we can just list off a couple vulnerabilities if it has them, instead of giving you 6 to 7 different percents. So I think that's an improvement of the system.
I agree that's an improvement of the system, but I'm still concerned, and I know I've said this already, I want to reiterate, I'm still very concerned about Tech 3 ships having the same resistances as Tech 20 ships. That seems counterintuitive, and it's either going to result in Tech 20 ships being way too easy to kill, or Tech 3 ships being way too hard to kill.
As long as we make sure that AI have reasonable shield banks, I don't think you should have a problem with like them with heavy fighter AI taking 30% having 30% resistance to your damage. Like right now I think the issue is at the lower levels, the balance of those AI is not in a good place. So that's why a Space Blue Beta on test is so much harder to kill than one on live. Because there's no way to even know what the resists of a Space Blue Beta are on live, right? Like the only way to know is by capping it or scanning it. And so as long
That new
as
scanner, I mean, yeah.
yeah, and as long as we make sure that the experience of killing a Space Blue Beta is not so far like and above the difficulty of killing something else at the same tech level, then I think it's okay.
There's two ways to listen to what you just said. I'm trying to decide which one it is. If all the ships at a tech level are unreasonably hard, that would technically meet the criteria you just laid down. But that would be overall bad for the game, in my opinion. Am I misinterpreting you? And I
Yes,
hope
you're
I am.
misinterpreting me.
Okay, good.
So
Do you
then
understand
one
what I
thing to
mean?
consider
Okay,
is
sorry.
that even if every ship has the same resistances, more or less, higher tech stuff does more damage. Higher tech stuff has better shield regen, shield bank, and more powerful resist augmenters. So obviously, like you say, low tech AI right now are too tanky. I'll take that as written, but that being true isn't really about ships all having the same type of resistance and armor. It's because we have to get the stats tuned correctly in the low tech. And once we tune the stats correctly, it's not going to be the problem you're referring to.
Cool. Okay.
So it seems like we've received. I'm not seeing a bunch of new information at this point about armor versus resistance, but it does seem fair to say that this is something that people are having thoughts about, maybe concerns or just questions.
I would generally support the idea of changing the armor stat to an omni-resist stat, just so that everything in the game is thematically talking about the same thing, and you don't get confused between two different stats that, in the end, do the same thing.
The thing is, so when I'm thinking about armor, other than the ship hull, Jeff, did we put armor on augmenters, or is it just the armor diffusers that also grant that bonus, that stat?
Just diffusers, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Any item could technically have it, but I don't think it's in the augmenter sheet. Is it, Hober?
No, it's not. I asked you, should we change things to it, but you were saying, well, it might not need to. So we
For
didn't
me,
do it.
thematically, putting armor in the augmenter didn't feel right, so I
I agree.
left resist all.
Cool. Yeah. So basically, right now, the only ways to get armor are to have it on your hull and to equip an armor diffuser. So one of the feedbacks here is that maybe it should just be a resist all effect. Which, if it was going to be that, then there's no point in even having it on the hull. We can just reflect it in the hull's resistances directly. So maybe we should have some internal conversation about how would that look? How much work would it take to do that? Do we want it to do that instead? And then get back to you all about it. Because it's not going to be something that we can just make a decision on in this meeting. It would be, we'd have to make sure we know what we're doing and what we're signing ourselves up for, basically.
I mean, there are a lot of reasons we went with armor in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a completely random thing, and I think they were good reasons.
Yeah, there's the additivity aspect.
It's additivity, and it also preserved the notion of using mining against heavily armored things and physical against non-armored things without having to go through and make every heavy fighter in the game have resistance to mining, which would be annoying and also kind of spammy. Whereas armor, once you understand how armor works, just a single armor stat encapsulates that knowledge.
Yep. Okay. I think I'm formulating a proposal for you, Jeff, that we can talk about offline, and then we can see what the players think. But I think we can kind of thread the needle on this one. I think it's fair to say that the way we've done it is confusing matters, but we probably can do it in a way that still achieves the baseline objectives. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Are there any other topics that you all would like to run by us? We are approaching the 2-hour mark. It's time I'm happy to spend. I guess I'm paying for my vacation right now, but we did, full disclosure, we really did put too much on you with this last testing event. It was kind of a bit shooting from the hip. Was never my intention. It just is a thing that happened. So let's try and do better next time. And we already have made a lot of internal improvement.
I
Go
have
ahead.
a question regarding solar panels rework. Can this out of time combat can be decreased to, let's say, 5 to 10 seconds maybe?
I think the changes that have been made to how out of combat works, and the fact that you can only get out of combat when you're not in the same galaxy as something that's hostile to you, or that you've attacked or whatever, like it's been made more robust. I think we might be able to reduce the combat timer. I don't know, but we have to be very careful because we don't want we don't want people to just dip in and out of combat to get out of combat stats very easily.
I understand that.
Can there be a range limit put on that something hostile to you? Because of situations in KD, for instance, where something just floats 20k out, but is technically hostile to you, and that is extremely irritating.
But you can just warp out though.
Yeah, I could see that being a situation. There's
AI in the other
places where that happens, right? Where if there's something very far away from you, you're legitimately not in combat with you. It could never fight you, but you'd still be out of combat with that system.
Did it ever shoot you?
Well, KD's auto aggro at the moment.
If it doesn't shoot you, then you're not going to be put into out of combat. If you haven't shot it and it hasn't shot you, it's not going to trigger out of combat stuff. It has to have actual hate generated against you, or you have to have hate generated against it.
As opposed to team hate.
Yeah, I think that's how Jay set it up. He set it up so. Wait, hold on. I need to double check, but there are some things that it does in regards to team hate, but that's not related to it's more about are you in combat, or is anyone in combat with something, right? Or were you in combat at any point? That's what the out of combat affects. I'm gonna go double check how Jay did this.
We did have discussions about this, and in the end we decided doing it by galaxy is just simpler to understand rather than seeing how far you are from something and trying to figure out what thing is too close and blah blah blah.
So right now, if anything hates you in the gal, you're in combat. Is that the system?
Yeah, it's team hate as well, and it had to be done that way because of I think it has to do with drones as well, drones and stuff that don't have souls but that are on a team. Because otherwise they don't propagate hate. They don't have hate because they're a drone.
I mean, if you're in a boss room, then the intention is you're not getting out of combat anything until you kill the boss.
Yeah. So what about
if you're in a
Kathy
boss
Depths?
room, so Kathy Depths, the idea is you're roaming around and that you should go to another galaxy.
But almost every galaxy has AI in it, and they can fly around and warp to different places. Oh wait, there are no drones in. There are no like teamed drones in there actually.
Merchant Navy contriver.
But it's not a drone though. It deploys drones.
Corrupted AI that lay the drones.
Okay, I need to be specific then. The issue isn't with drones laid by an AI. The issue is with drones that are spawned in and are not like don't have an AI that they've been deployed
Lurker
from.
makes a good point that there's no point in bringing panels and shield chargers on instanced runs if you can't use them during the boss fight, which is the only hard part of the fight, probably.
You can use it to charge up going into the boss room, like after you've cleared the previous room.
And if you die in the boss room in the boss fight, like you want to get back out of combat. Like if you die, like you want to have panels and a charger so that you can get your health and energy back.
What about small percentage on the solar panels for example passive charge for combat bots? Maybe 20% of actual power of solar panels, maybe.
We decided not to do that.
Okay. So it's purely out of combat item.
Yeah, my original thing with the solar panels is there was some amount in combat, some amount out of combat, blah blah blah, and then we decided if we did that, players would just go for whatever gave them the most in combat, and then sit around while they were out of combat.
And be frustrated also, because they were sitting around.
So there's supposed to be quality of life now, for the most part. I guess the other thing I was going to say about KD is sort of when I picture in my head how it works in KD, it's more like you're pushing deeper and deeper, right? And you might want to keep the galaxy behind you cleared out so that people can dip back in there and recharge.
If we're gonna do that, we need to make it so that once you clear a galaxy out, like it works kind of like a dungeon, where it's like things don't come flying in. Basically, we have to change KD back to the way it used to be, where things don't fly between. Well, no, that's not how it used to be, but things shouldn't fly between galaxies if that's the case. Like they shouldn't leave their galaxy, except unless they're a roaming boss, which I think is actually what we were going to do in the beginning. Now that I remember when me and you were talking about redoing it, I don't know why we didn't do that.
Make them all spawn like in the tips and then gradually travel in.
Right, but it's not
the roaming bosses. So yeah,
people can still circumvent you by mistake and get behind you.
Yeah. But if they did spawn in the tips, then circling around behind you would be much less of an issue.
Yeah, I think if we just make it so that the boss roamers do that and other AI don't, like they just spawn in the galaxy and they stay in their galaxy, then I think that'll be okay. Because then you can just go back to the other galaxy. Because things only spawn in when someone else has killed them.
Okay, and another issue is when I'm DGing, most of DG levels do not have suns.
So it makes panels useless.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how it works now, though. Like if there's a DG level without a sun, you have to like go back again to try to find a DG level with a sun. That's no different than it is on live, though.
Yeah, Hober, but I'm getting more electric regen now than on the test.
You mean out of combat?
No, he's saying
on Liberty I have more electric regen than on the test with these changes.
How do you have
an point that Ahil makes and Dread that like we've created an out of combat item that only works in certain terrain, which is maybe not industry standard.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Out of combat regeneration usually does not depend on the terrain. I've never seen that anywhere else.
Maybe we should bite the bullet and make panels just work like shield chargers, which is not requires suns to be nearby.
I mean,
I'm
at that
okay
point,
with
why
it.
even have
Let's
panels?
leave it how it is.
Okay, let's leave it how it is, and it will take a year to get the changes done.
I think it's definitely a fair critique to say that it's not industry standard for out of combat effects to require certain terrain. So we at least have, if this is how we want it to be, we at least have to admit that we're intentionally creating something that's not
What
like
if
standard.
what if we made like a cosmic radiation panel that doesn't require a sun, but it's not as good as a solar panel?
I mean, the entire UZ has a fake sun aura everywhere, for example, because people wanted to use panels back then. The whole place is radioactive.
I mean, the reality is that if you do that, you're tacitly admitting that solar panels that are that are based on the sun being nearby suck to use. So the fact that you even suggested that, Jeff, I think kind of
I don't
points
know.
to that.
I like the way solar panels. I like that you have to go find a sun. I just wish we had a sun in like one of the rooms of Olympus. That's all. If you're roaming KD, there's plenty of suns. Like you probably don't have to go more than one jump to find one. DG's too. Like at least half, probably 2/3 have suns.
Yeah, and I have to kill all the AIs in the galaxy so I can regen for 1 minute.
General philosophy. What's the problem with admitting something sucks if it sucks?
I'm worried that we're going to get back to this idea that dying is the best way to replenish your resources, which I really don't like, but it's pretty good on test.
Well,
That is a good. Actually, that is a pretty good heuristic. So, like, if limitations like, for example, sun stuff results in people intentionally stasising to regenerate, that would be a sign that we should change how out of combat regen works.
but actually, what that does though is if you make solar panels work no matter where you are, and dying puts you out of combat, then dying makes the solar panels work because you're not in combat, and they charge from anything. Whereas currently, you don't want to just die in a place with no sun.
Well, there's centered, for example, but I don't know if that's a big enough factor.
Yeah.
Or remove remove solar panels from the game and introduce some kind of generators who work out of the combat just to replenish the energy.
Like a shield distribution system or something,
You don't even need to introduce anything, though. I mean, the idea is a ship has a limited source of what it can allocate power to, and if it's not allocating power to combat, because then it's out of combat, it can probably use that, overhead to charge its other properties. Like, you don't have to, spin anything really futuristic here. A ship in out of combat mode is probably using less power than a ship in combat mode. Like, I'm not even talking about, the elect cost of your modules. I mean,
That's just a simple case of changing what they're called in the flavor text.
Okay, well, so just like with the discussion about armor, it seems like a lot of people have opinions on the state of out of combat stuff, especially panels. So maybe the most sensible thing is for us to go back and discuss whether we want to come up with any alternatives, or whether we do want to maintain the current system and why that is, and then get back to you all about that.
Yeah. There's one thing that I didn't see mentioned, but it's kind of been intimated and pointed at. I've been asked this a bunch of times, and I feel like this is probably the right time to bring it up. There's a lot of concern about classes right now that do not feel good on live that we will eventually be reworking. Sniper is the thing that comes to mind eventually, although there are some concerns about like other pain points for other classes like Berserker or seer or speed demon. Um, and the question basically is, why are we choosing not to make what are called by the players quality of life changes in the interim that make playing those classes more fun in lieu of waiting until we do the entire class change? Like basically, there is a sense of incredulity, however you say the word, but like confusion about why we're not making changes to things to make them more fun for right now, while we wait to get to the actual class revamp.
Okay. And are you wanting somebody to speak to that sense?
Yeah, like I've answered this from the dev perspective multiple times. Like I've answered for the dev team multiple times, but it has not been sufficient, and I think it would help if there was some acknowledgement of that question from you and Jeff.
I'm
Uh,
sorry, I have to go pick my daughter up from school.
all right, Jeff. Thanks
But
for coming in. I'm sure everyone appreciates hearing your perspective. Uh,
yeah, thank you.
See ya.
See you.
I guess I can try to answer the question to a certain extent. We want to avoid fiddling because when we make a bunch of little changes at a constant level, it just creates like it shakes the game up to every time we do it. And so if the class is playable, we want to like just let it be until we can turn our full attention to it. So that's usually our practice. We've fiddled in the past and it has just kind of placed the game into a state of uncertainty every time we did it. So I'm trying to discourage people from fiddling through too much. That doesn't mean I am completely opposed to making quality of life changes in a situation where it's really like if the situation indicates it. And I think it would also be fair to say, since our timeline on this project is extended, and that means that it's going to be somewhat longer until we can get to those intended reworks of the other classes, it would be fair for us to consider like one single design pass where we also make some improvements to other classes that are going to now be waiting a little while before we can get to them. So if it comes to sniper analysis resistance thing or other simple like local changes we can make, I would be okay with just taking a survey and then weighing the options and then potentially making a small like a one and done pass of QOL changes to other classes in acknowledgement that we're taking longer than we intended to get to those classes and give them our full attention. As to the so I think end of August is still possible, but that is already later than we had really wanted for this rework.
Yep.
Let me check my timetable.
Yep, we
here.
wanted like mid-August, I think is what we were talking about, like August 15th or something, around that time.
Before that, I mean, I really wanted end of June for this project, but no, end of June for the testing to begin. So and end of July for the testing event to be done. So that's what I originally wanted. So at this point, we're about a month behind, just because the project needs a lot more work than we had hoped. So that's why I'm saying I would be okay with one package deal QOL pass on the other 6 classes. I'm not going to commit to making any changes that the players are asking for, but I would definitely be okay with reviewing the various ideas plus internal ideas the dev team can come up with as to hold like stopgap changes we can make.
Okay, I think that answers the question. The fact that we're willing to consider that is I think will help that.
Mm-hmm.
I have one little QL thing I think all players would agree on is interceptors. Why do they have autumn radars? They should probably have that nerf to an extent because snipers and seers and speed demons are always struggling with those right now.
Okay.
At least in so.
I guess it comes down to what the purpose of that AI is. I think that the main purpose is to stop you from AFK, APing through if you're stealthy and or fast, but especially stealthy. So I guess my first question is, do they stop that? Are they doing their job?
They do, but they don't have any loot, so it just punishes active players as well.
Yeah.
Mainly punishes people when there's groups of 40 of them in one galaxy. 1 or 2 is fine, but the swarms are unreasonable.
Yeah, so those things, like 40 in one galaxy that are flying around is a result of multiple things. Generally, what we've tried to do is I think we figured out why giant swarms of them would group together and fly around from galaxy to galaxy. But there are also some issues with the layout of Calthy depths, which causes AI to clump in certain galaxies because they can't go anywhere else. I like that's a whole situation that we have to figure out. I know for a fact though that somebody put loot on them, and when the next universe rolls around, they'll have loot. I'm pretty sure someone went through and made that change.
Okay. Guess we'll deal with it, I guess, until then. At least I will. I'm not sure how other people feel.
Well, it sounds like we're just talking about making ordinary Calthy AI no longer roam, and that would address this problem, wouldn't it?
No, actually. No, it wouldn't. Sorry to interrupt you, but it wouldn't, because what would happen is if you warped into a galaxy that no one else had been in, right? You would find a ton of AI sitting in the galaxy because of the way that the Calthy Depths spawners works. Every time you kill something, its spawner relocates somewhere else randomly. So the well-traveled galaxies would be relatively free of stuff, but the not so well-traveled galaxies would have like hordes of AI in them. Which
there could be a hard capped limit on how many of a certain type of AI can be in Calthy depths.
Yeah, we don't need so many of those.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. We could hard cap the limits of the number of AI.
Okay. Dow had a question about Zen skills and other SP syncs. So what we're going for here is that these skills are nice to max, but you do just fine with like 30 to 50 points in a 100-point skill, which isn't very expensive to get. I looked into it, and I think it was based on your initial spreadsheet that you created for me, Dow. To get 50 in each one, you only need to get your character to like level 3 to 4K, which has always been our sort of benchmark for a fully developed character. And what we're going for is to have the incremental bonus on these skills low enough that going from 50 to 100 isn't game breaking. It's nice to have if you happen to level your character a lot, but you shouldn't really feel like you're missing out on a lot otherwise. That's the balance we're trying to strike with those skills.
Yeah, and we know that for a min-maxer at the very end game, we understand that like even 5% difference for y'all is like, oh, 5%. Oh man, that means I win fights that I wouldn't win before. Like I understand that. So like it is intentional that these are at the very top end, like things that you want to chase after.
Scaling on level. Are we talking about Zens? Okay. It already is like that. If it's, for example, something that's 1% per level, then after getting 50 levels of it, you've got plus 50%. Get 100 levels, it's plus 100. So that's going to be 2 over 1.5. That means that you're looking at 33% improvement for the last 50 levels of it, which isn't anywhere. It's less than the 50% improvement you had for the first 50. And if we dial down the bonus per level, that effect gets more dramatic.
Yeah, and we went from pretty large bonuses to 1% now, and that's like the difference in power per level is very clear now.
Are there certain skills that you all are finding that you all are particularly concerned about, to the point that having 50 levels in it feels way too weak versus having 100 levels in it?
Zenith far reaching.
Yes.
But that's additive though. It's like, why does that feel weak?
Have you played a character with Zenithar reaching 50 and then leveled it up to 100?
I've gotten up to 90 on it, but yes, I've had a player character that I went from 50 to 100 or whatever it was. It was my berserker.
Yeah, it feels like a huge difference.
I have range augs on my Zerg, so it doesn't really feel that big to me, but maybe that's just me and the way I play mine. Like it's like a couple hundred. It's like for the weapons I use, it's like 300 more range. Like
That's a lot.
I can see it. It's not a lot when I have like 1800 range with a weapon versus
It's still a
1500.
lot, actually.
It just what I'm
Yes,
saying
but
is it
you're
doesn't
saying
feel
it's
a lot. That's all I'm saying is how it feels to me. I'm not saying it isn't objectively a lot.
you're saying it's additive, and that's fine, but the lower your range goes, the bigger impact it has. And the majority of strong weapons are lower range, so it has a much higher impact.
Yeah,
Isn't the
but you're
bonus
only allowed to
capped?
have double. Go ahead,
Yeah,
sorry, Hank.
the bonus is capped at double the weapons range, though, right?
Yes.
Fairly sure that's after any percentage range bonuses.
Yes, it is. So if you have a 100 range weapon, in order for you to get plus 700 range, you would have to have 600% range bonuses. So like if you're already auging for range heavily, yeah, you will notice the difference. But if you don't, it's not very noticeable at the for for a 100 or 200 range weapon. It's really noticeable. Like the numbers themselves are noticeable on weapons that are already kind of high range. If you have a 500 range weapon, you can definitely see the difference between going from level 50 to level like 100, even though you don't really need to go to level 100. Like you can see that difference in the ship window. And then when you shoot the weapon, you can like see that, oh wait, this has like 300 extra 300? Like
Maybe
150 extra
Zenithar
range.
should be percent wise.
You're I don't know that we're gonna get that to happen, but we can talk about it internally. I've tried for so long. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll think about that one, Bills. Let's see here. We have ZOE. People are saying that one's mandatory. So going from 50 to 100 on that means you have 33% more bank, which is, I do admit, a good amount of energy bank, although energy bank as a stat is usually not considered that valuable compared to damage, shield regen, things like that, energy regen even.
The thing is, Zenith shielding, though, shield bank is one of the most valuable stats in Star Sonata in a lot of situations. And
yeah,
having 33% more shields than the other guy in PvP means you probably win like 100% of the time, assuming everything else is equal.
But it's
And I
usually
think this
not
is one of the
though.
things that worries people. What do you mean?
Everything else is not equal.
Right. So it would be worse, is what I'm saying. Like the best case scenario is that your setup is rough, has rough parity with somebody else's, and they have 33% shields on you. But this just adds another multiplier to the set of multipliers that creates for these massive gulfs between characters of different skill investment. And I think that can be a problem in a game where you have things like sovereignty warfare and your space can get contested, and you actually might have to fight somebody. It's not always opt-in. You know what I mean?
it's possible that ZOS should be nerfed even further and more of that bonus put onto the shields. The good news there is that's something that we can do quite easily. I also want to point out, though, that like for a given class, there could be a couple Zens where you do feel really good maxing them, but I am trying to get the skills set up so that you shouldn't feel the necessity to have all these Zens maxed. So even pushing 3 of them, 4 of them up toward 100 doesn't cost that many levels. It's when you start trying to max 8 different Zens that you start needing to get like very close to 10k character level. So I'm not sure it's that. I mean, yeah, 50 ZOS versus 100 ZOS, I agree that is a pretty big shield bank difference. And if you are going into a PvP fight, that will make a difference. But is that really going to take place too much? I think people who are PvPing are probably going to get a lot of skill points dumped into ZOS. And as long as
They're
don't
going to
feel
take
like
less in thrust and turning. Yeah.
as long as they don't feel like they're extremely gimped in terms of not maxing the other Zens, then I would say the dev team has done their job there. So that's the thing that I'm really more interested in, not whether 50 ZOS versus 100 ZOS is balanced.
Okay, that's all I wanted to address. I mean, for some of these skills, the difference between 50 and 100 is huge. That's kind of the debate we were having. So,
right. So the thing I want to know more about, which is I guess going to require more testing, more looking at, is have we struck the correct balance so that on like overall a level 3,000 to 4,000 character is able to get suitably powerful using the skill points they have in their Zens? Or are we in a situation where that the extra distance, however you want to allocate those skill points, is producing a major gulf?
I think it's
sort
going
of
to
leads
be.
into the next point.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Halvin.
Go ahead, Jirok.
So the next point is, if you're going to create all these nice stretch goals for characters that they can reach if they eventually level up to very high levels, you need to provide, I think, better ways to get there. Because right now it looks like if you take a trip through Sauce or Pashka, you'll see exactly how people are getting there for the most part. And I don't know if that was your design intent, but that's the meta.
Yeah, we definitely want to give you all better ways to level. That's true. We would like leveling to be fun and rewarding. I think probably people will agree that we've already taken on quite a lot with this project, and I wouldn't be keen to create a whole new branch of it to figure out how to solve the leveling question. Players do tend to be very clever at figuring out how to level AFK, which is fine, but if we put a lot of work into creating a fun active way to level, and then people find out that they can AFK it, then that's also wasted dev time. Yes, long term, we would like to give you all more exciting ways to level.
That sounds great.
In the meantime, if we can at least have assurances that getting to level 3 to 4K, which isn't too hard no matter how you do it, will put you on reasonable footing in terms of an intelligent use of your skill points toward the Zens that help you. If we have assurances of that, then I think that's an okay state of affairs to leave the game in as we then build toward new projects such as making leveling more interesting and effective. So that's like the bar that I'm trying to clear right now. I'm not necessarily claiming we have cleared it, but that's where I'm setting my sights in this project.
It sounds good to me.
Yeah, actually, when it comes to making certain like well understood bosses that are well known to be tough, making them grant more levels, I probably would be okay throwing that in. I mean, something like that probably shouldn't hurt.
Just generally bosses that have a 1 week lockout being more levels would probably be reasonable.
Yeah. I just want to be careful about making stuff that can be AFK'd because that just isn't as fun.
Yeah, obviously things that don't have lockouts can be AFK, but things that have a 1 week lockout, you can't kill them more than once. So.
Well, when we say AFK, we mean like you just
Sap, Pachka.
Yeah.
I'm actually okay with AFK leveling existing. Like, I don't strictly mind it. Like, it's uncommon, but I don't think Star Sonata should necessarily set out and try to match every other industry standard game. You know, like it's cool that you can do that if you're creative. It just shouldn't be like the best way to do it.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing. I don't have a problem with you all leveling however you see fit. all I'm saying is if I put dev time toward creating a new, like, fun, engaging way to level, and then it can then be AFK'd for leveling, that's just a waste of our dev time because you already had AFK leveling mechanisms.
I mean, the next step should be botting, right? Then you can go after the botters, but it should require the bot to AFK level that's efficiently, at least, which is the case in most other games. In most other games, if you want to really efficiently AFK level a character, you have to basically do botting, and this could get you banned. So it's a cost benefit kind of thing, right?
Yeah. When it comes to making bosses grant more XP, I'll put a feeler out on the dev team and see if we want to just throw that in.
I mean, some of them do already, and they feel great to kill. Like Electrified George Rome is fun to kill because he spawns a bunch of stuff that's worth a bunch of experience points. You level up a few times. It's great.
And also, you can't really AFK kill him either. You have to.
You definitely can. But yeah, I get your point.
I mean,
Gunner is strong. That's
you
all
can
I'll say.
AFK kill him. What do you mean by that? Like,
you can't camp him.
If you just
no, you can't. He's a roamer. That's true.
Yeah, it's like if you just sit there and try to like tank and spank him while doing a little like constant damage, you're gonna just lose the fight.
In regards to content having to be created to encourage that and help leveling, there already exists the Crucible. We can just expand upon that, maybe change some of the AI spawning.
I'm sure we could add extra levels to the Crucible.
For people to go if they want to grind levels.
I think the AI there are very degraded in terms of level, though. I think they were lowered in the past or something.
Yeah, we didn't want people constantly resetting the instance to go in and like level in the past. I'm pretty sure it wasn't about
active
leveling.
leveling source, and you nerfed it.
Yeah.
Own goal. Like, no, you're not active leveling like I want you to. Nerf.
But, you know, like I think it's just wise to make bosses in general give XP, like more of it. Even in DGs, to be honest, like make DG bosses higher level. Give us a reason to clear DGs. Of course, I'm a DG grinder, so I like any buff to DG.
Okay, I'll get that conversation rolling on the dev team.
Even DG bosses, I think the DGs kick you out if it respawns, so you can't AFK.
Yeah, you can't. You can. There's ways to quasi AFK, but it's enough effort that I don't really view it as like it's not fully automated, right? Like sitting in the level prior to the boss level, waiting for the spawn each time on timers, and then going in there, I think is fine. It's whatever.
I was considering when they were talking about AFK was like literally sitting in SAS with my computer running for 24 hours while I'm out doing other stuff, not looking at the computer ever.
It's basically like Bitcoin farming SS edition.
Yeah, except it's actually more productive than Bitcoin farming is these days. But it's fine.
I mean,
you actually make more money.
Yeah,
I won't talk about this,
yeah, I was about to say, but that is actually flat out true. So that's a problem.
Like if you want to spend your computing cycles to make real life dollars,
okay.
Oh no, Jira, what have you done?
Right.
I mean, it shouldn't be like that. I'm like advocating for the game not to work that way.
Okay, so I'm going to optimistically state that we have answered all your questions. I'm sure that's not really true. But do you all mind if we wrap this? It's been 2.5 hours. It's good to hear all your voices. I'm glad to be back working on SS. I understand that you continue to have concerns. I have some homework to do to bring up some of those items into the dev team that were discussed. The main ones being armor and do you remember the other one, Hober?
Oh, yeah, class bonuses. Sorry, like we were talking. Wait, hold on. Wait, oh, I'm sorry.
That was another one, right?
Yeah, that was another one. It was out of combat and armor. Those were the healing revamp specific takeaways from this. Then there's some others.
And then there's also like the class QOL stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's actually not so in regards to class QOL, if we decide that that's what we're going to do, like I can just literally refer back to notes from like a meeting we did 8 months ago. Like I still have the notes from that meeting about what it is that each class, like what people would like for each class to make quality of life better.
Let's just get that rolling. We can figure out if there's a lightweight thing we can do there. Space points and more cosmetics. We do produce skins now and then that you can buy for SP, right? Or holo projectors sometimes as well. Do we sell holo projectors right now?
I think so. Like the googly eyes and stuff like that, right?
I would love to sell you more things. So, yeah, we have some people on the team who have produced some really nice stuff, and then some folks in the community as well.
I have one comment that's a little alarming, and I've been working with a lot of new players, about 6 of them or so. A lot of them have no idea what the game has to offer. They just see the Nexus, and they are deterred pretty early. I think having something to kind of demonstrate what this game has to offer in terms of bases, like 4 of the guys out of the 6 didn't know what bases were in this game. They didn't know that existed. Like there needs to be a little bit more effort somewhere to kind of like show people what the game has to offer right out the front door, you know?
You know,
we have to be extremely careful about overwhelming new players with features. Like, it's really easy to do that really fast.
Yeah.
So let's consider this. This game is weird. And people who stay are the ones who like it for what it is. We are not trying to make a game that appeals to even 10% of the people who try it, most likely, just because it's a very niche game. And now that we're in the game, we do have the ability to periodically participate in promotions and sales and get a nice injection of new players. We should not hold ourselves to the standard of retaining the bulk of them, just because it's not for everyone. And I think the new Nexus does actually do a pretty good job of showcasing one of the most important parts of the game, which is the arcade combat. It's so much the lifeblood of the game that people in this call, me included, kind of forget how special it is. But I played a lot with new players during the Steam launch, and I could tell who it was clicking for. I could watch certain people noticing how interesting the arcade combat is, even in the early game. So I don't know. I think that we are actually not doing too bad a job of showcasing what the game has to offer. I actually do have a project I'm managing right now on improving Arctia, Blue Outpost, and maybe as a stretch goal, Vulcan.
Ooh, okay.
To build on the successes of the new Nexus, courtesy of the QA team and Sundog, in addition to other developers, and continue applying those practices of introducing a new zone. One concept I had that we're going to work on is actually giving the player a combat bot, like in space, that they can fight with. So, because we introduced remote control, but we introduced it in a kind of contrived way, because in the early game, you don't capture other ships. If you're going to use bots, it's because you built them yourself. So we want to get people now experiencing that half of remote control instead, and at an early stage, they start really noticing how cool it is to have combat bots. So
that's a wonderful way to do that. I really like that idea.
Right on. So I think in a way we are doing what you're talking about, but it's not going to be by redesigning the Nexus or tearing up what we do have. We just have to really take it slow and try to pick 1, 2, 3 absolutely crucial aspects of the game that we can showcase at an appropriate time.
Maybe when they're browsing on Steam, maybe it could be just one more video showcasing the logistical side of managing a base, and just kind of show the bots. Maybe something like that, so they know that's a part of the game, because it's very vague, the video I found. But yeah, I think that's a great way of implementing remote control, and I really like the direction you're going.
Cool. I'm glad. Yeah, because this is something that we haven't publicized, not because it's secret, just because people have been busy, we've been busy. But it is. I think when I'm thinking about it. What's that?
Can I push back on something you said, please? If you're losing 90% of the people who are logging in at Nexus, then I would like to very strongly disagree that you're showcasing the game appropriately, because that to me would imply that there are huge aspects of the game that they had no clue about before they downloaded. Does that make sense?
I mean, we should be clear. I'm just speaking off the top of my head. I'm not speaking in reference to any analytics, but I think you'll find that for a lot of games, people are going to try it, and there's going to be enormous attrition in the first couple levels.
Yep.
So
even World of Warcraft.
We do have the analytics. I'm just not speaking to them directly, and in the main, we are pretty happy with our retention numbers through the first 10 levels to the first 20 levels. Speaking to Corrupted Seeker's point, I'm actually thinking what you said. It would be pretty cool if we had a very snappy 30-second video of someone doing RTS, like with combat bots, and I think if it were edited correctly and shot correctly, it could really showcase the fleet kind of vibe of the game.
You know what time it is? Time to make a new holo projector and award it to whoever makes the best video.
I guarantee if somebody produces a good video like that, we'll find a way to reward you. It's not hard.
Yeah,
but it does have to be snappy. It has to be really good because it's an unfamiliar interface, and so it needs to somehow communicate what we're trying to communicate with great clarity.
Wonderful. Okay.
I actually really like that you've highlighted the arcade combat aspect of Star Sonata, because I also think this is important, and I brought it up recently when I was making a different argument. Arcade combat is a lot more fun when your ships can move.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to nerf your speed like crazy. Like I remember watching new players, like so fresh new player, level 2, and the minute they realize they can dodge, you can just tell. Even just watching their Zebukart. So I think that kind of thing really was well accomplished by the new Nexus.
Yeah, it's unique about Star Sonata. I mean, this game is very special, and I'm glad that you guys are taking the pains to make sure that it stays that way. Because we could just make a 2D Eve clone if we all wanted to sit down and spend years doing that. But then it's like, why? Let's go play Eve.
I have a really, really good idea for helping player retention as well, and it'll only take a second. Just migrate Seiya's Retreat's skills tab, like all the Zen skills, to like a player attribute thing. So let's make another tab in player character, whatever, so people can feel like they're literally leveling up their character post rework, where it's like 1%. That would be awesome. They would see like, wow, I can get 10% more thrust right now just by leveling up a few times. That might really help spark their interest in the game.
That's interesting. Yeah, we'll have to think about whether we want the Zens to be in a more character development type of tab, or if we want them just to be accessible as skills.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know they exist until I show them. They're like, what? Flat range? What the heck?
That is true.
I think that's also going to be part of the early game progression rework we have in mind. So another part of that is going to be possibly routing people straight through Lyceum on their way out of Nexus, for example.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Making
Yeah.
sure that they actually are equipped to use their class that they have newly selected. So we're definitely open to changing the paradigm like that. So I'll see if it makes sense to include Zens in there somehow.
Okay. Thank you for answering.
Mm-hmm. It does seem like we're kind of off topic at this point. Obviously, we're still on the topic of Star Sonata, but I think maybe it would be a good idea to wrap this up. I'm sure it's going to be a long video for anyone who actually wants to watch it start to finish.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So I appreciate you all. Hopefully you are willing to stick with us and see what we can accomplish based on the feedback you've given. I really do think that the underlying plan with making healing 1-to-1 and the other kind of core changes we're making to the classes, I really do think that these are things that will improve the game once we get the balance right. But I fully acknowledge that some stuff is overly complicated, some stuff is just not set up correctly, and some stuff is honestly bugged. So we do have a lot of work to do, and I will get right back to that if you all will let me.
All right.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
It is my pleasure. See you all in the chats.
Thanks, dude.
Oh, you will.
All right, signing off.